Every year, a fair comes to my town. It wasn't a thing I really went to often. I always heard about my friends or family going, but I stayed home not overly interested. Recently, they've fused a comic book convention with the fair. People wearing costumes with capes and going on rides seem like a safety hazard if you ask me. No matter how hard I tried to get excited over the idea of it, or getting invited to go down to the fair, I just never bothered going. And yet, I found myself sitting at a table listening to the sounds of the rides, a bit hazy on how I got there or why. A small set of tickets for the rides in my pocket and smells of deep-fried food tempting me to buy something. I was sitting alone, so why did I go to the fair? I couldn't seem to remember anyone dragging me along. A group sat down at the table next to mine. They were noisy and showing too much affection towards their partners for a family-friendly location. I was about to get up and leave to head home when I noticed someone I recognized in the group, but by himself. A guy I went to school with, and I had a hard time thinking of his name. We were only 2 years out of high school, and he looked exactly the same as when we last saw each other. He was in my class, but we weren't friends. I still respected him. Honestly, he was the only decent person in our class. He came from a rich family, and yet he wasn't stuck up. I stood hovering at my table about to leave when his name clicked. His name was Ashley. That didn't make him any friends in school. In fact, people only tended to hang out with him to get free food or borrow cash. From the looks of it, the group he was with was only interested in those two things. Ashley dropped off food and took orders for more. Everyone besides himself wore bracelets that got you on rides all day. I always thought the bracelets cost far too much to really justify buying them. Without any doubt, Ashley was the one who paid for them. I watched as he did food runs, getting whatever they wanted. When he finally sat down, the rest of the group were so interested in their free food, none of them even thanked him or even looked in his direction. Unable to help myself, I went over to his table. "Hey, Ashley, we went to school together. Come sit with me for a bit," I told him, and gestured towards the empty table. He looked up, unsure of what to do. His friends teased him for being picked up by a girl or asking if I was his girlfriend they didn't know he had. When he didn't answer, I gently took his hand and led him a few steps away. He'd always been a pushover, a very kind guy that everyone took advantage of. I'm pretty certain he would have done anything if I had asked with enough force. We both felt awkward suddenly sitting across from each other. He was nice enough to start up a conversation first. What have you been doing?" he asked in a soft voice. "I work at a factory. Hey, how about we get you something to eat?" When I stood up, he followed. This guy bought food for all of his so-called friends and nothing for himself. We took a few minutes picking something. He only got a small order of fries, and I found a stall selling some not deep-fried chicken wraps. We both saw the deep-fried Mars bars for sale and commented on how terrible that sounded. Of course, we got one to share. His friends didn't even notice he was missing. They already got their meal and bracelets for the rides. Aside from if they wanted to play some games, they didn't need his wallet for anything else at the moment. "You really shouldn't let people take advantage of you like this," I said, nodding towards the noisy group after we sat back down. "It's fine. I'm glad they can have a nice day out," Ashley replied in such a low voice it was hard to hear him over the noise. He kept his hair long and tied back. Everything about him just downright soft. The kids in school were brutal on him, and that didn't help him open up more. We should have spent more time hanging out back then. "They're jerks. I'm pretty sure one of them shoved you in the trash once. They really don't deserve a paid day out. If they wanted to have fun, they should use their own money." "It's not really my own money either," he said, not denying how he was bullied before. I let out a sigh and let him pick away at his fries. I suppose he always felt guilty living off of his parents' money. His parents appeared to be the type to confuse cash with love, and that passed down to him. Looking him over, I wondered if this guy had ever been happy before. He tossed around money trying to make friends and to get a shred of positive attention. That backfired and people only wanted to use him. "Sorry, I was being rude. It's really not up to me how you spend your money," I said. He gave a weak smile and tried to push the deep-fried Mars bar in my direction. That was a burden we needed to share together. At the same time, we shoved half of it in our mouths, the sweetness putting my teeth on edge. The pair of us grimacing at our mistake, and Ashley let out a small laugh from it all. As he was cleaning off his hands from the grease, I noticed he wasn't wearing a bracelet. He'd bought one for those four, but not himself. After all, it was kind of awkward going on a ride alone when your friends were paired up. "Hey, let's get you a bracelet and go on some rides." He looked confused at the offer. I took advantage of his pushover personality and dragged him along to the ticket booth. By the time he got his wallet and debit card out, I already paid and almost had a bracelet on his thin wrist. He looked pretty shocked. This might be the first time someone bought him something. "I can pay you back," he offered quickly. "Don't worry about it. My job pays pretty well. I can afford it." It was the truth. In exchange for wearing down my body, I got paid a crazy amount per hour. More than what most of my classmates would earn after they went to school for a job of their choice. They would be doing a job they wanted, though. I got stuck doing a boring job that would nearly cripple me in 10 years. At least in those years, I could afford to buy a house if I saved up, and then I could switch to a part-time job to pay my bills. "I should ask if my group wants to go on some rides with us," Ashley said, looking toward the food area. I raised an eyebrow at him. It was nice of him to try and include them, but they didn't even notice he left. And they wouldn't until someone wanted him to pay for something. "Do you have their numbers?" "Yes," he replied slowly. "Then send them a text. They can meet up when they feel like it." He accepted the answer because the group of friends were still eating and he could see how I wanted to do something else. I mostly wanted him to enjoy the day for once. As we walked, he mentally reached for straws on a topic we could talk about. We hadn't spoken to each other much before, so he wasn't sure of what to say. "It's nice to see you're doing well. I heard all sorts of rumors in school," he offered as a topic. I nearly shuddered thinking back to the nightmare that was high school. My family life wasn't ideal back then. I wanted to move out as soon as possible and started to do any kind of odd job to save up, hiding the money from my parents for good reason. It all blew up a year before I graduated when my father found my stash and stole it for his vices. I was so angry I snapped. No one thought a teenage girl could put a full-grown man in the hospital, but I somehow did. He never spoke to me again, and I moved into a terrible apartment to finish my last year of school. Nah, most of it was true. Aside from selling myself for money, that was spread by some douche because I wouldn't sleep with him, I said with a shrug. Ashley looked startled. Maybe because he got stuck walking around with someone who beat up their own parent. If he wanted to leave at that point, I would let him. He stayed following my steps, silently trying to think of anything else to say. We made our way towards a small selection of rides, and some people in costumes passed by, heading towards one of the many contests held throughout the day. I looked towards one of the rides shaped as a boat that went upside down, and Ashley glanced over at the super lame haunted house. When I took a step closer to the boat ride, it took him a second to catch up. I turned on my heel to head back towards the haunted house, knowing he would never speak up when it came to something he wanted to do. Something reflected some light off in the crowd, stealing my attention for a second. Someone had gone all out with their costume. Towering over the crowd in the distance stood a man wearing a large flat disc as a mask. It looked to be one made out of some dark gray metal. From behind the mask spilled out black feathers covering his shoulders. I couldn't see much from the people blocking his body. I couldn't place the costume. For the most part, I could guess what show or video game people would dress up as. When he turned, the metal reflected the light again. I saw an upside-down smiling mouth on the top of the metal mask. I bumped into Ashley by mistake. He stopped in line for the haunted house. When I looked back, the tall man with the odd mask was gone. I didn't see a spot where someone that tall could have gone in such a short amount of time. A bit weird, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. There weren't too many people lined up for the short ride, so we got on pretty fast. The cars were shaped as cartoonish bats. I sat in the hard, glittering plastic seat and watched Ashley put his seatbelt on, even though he didn't really need to. These cars went at a snail's pace. The short trip was a very basic dark ride. No flashing lights for people sensitive to that. The sunlight got through small cracks of the building, ruining the illusion. Normally, I wasn't really good at handling haunted houses. Things bumping in my face normally got a reaction out of me punching them. The small jump scares in that ride were so minor I didn't react, but Ashley did. He jumped up and grabbed my arm when a skeleton rattled a cage next to us. For a wimp, I was impressed he wanted to go through with this. After it was all said and done, we got off and he looked as if he went through a pretty intense experience. "And you really shouldn't be mean and tap me on the shoulder during rides like that," he scolded. "I wasn't tapping your shoulder," I lied. His face grew pale. I really shouldn't be messing with him, but it was far too easy. I guided him away from the poorly made ride, him now positive it really was haunted. We needed to find something he could actually handle. I was hoping to let him have a bit more fun before his group stole him away again. We heard his friends first. As we walked, shouting came down the path and the crowd of people started to avoid the spot. One of the couples he had ridden with started having a screaming match about something. Apparently, she was giving other guys too much attention and her boyfriend wasn't at all happy about that. My meek and shy new friend started to hurry over, ready to break up the fight. I held him back before he reached him. We needed to think of a plan before he just jumped right in. A sharp sound rang through the air and made us all jump. The girl said something the guy didn't like, so he lost it. He slapped her so hard the poor girl almost fell over. Their two friends so shocked they couldn't react. Any of the people still watching the whole ordeal froze in the spot, unsure of what to do. I was about to charge in and let loose on him for doing such a thing when the masked man I'd seen before appeared behind the group. Literally appeared. I froze, wondering if I was seeing things. How could someone just step out of thin air like that? The man was so tall he towered over the group. His body was so thin I could see his ribs and the outline of his hip bones. He only wore a tattered, dirty sheet around his waist that reached his feet. The mask of dark gray metal with the upside-down mouth reflecting the frightened face of the guy who just smacked his girlfriend. "Having fun?" The voice that came from the mask croaked and shouldn't have been loud enough to be heard over the crowd of people. How come no one looked startled by this guy? Aside from the six of us, no one even appeared to be paying any attention to the masked man. All at once, I knew that wasn't the right word. It wasn't whoever, but whatever. This guy wasn't wearing a costume. Acting on instinct, I grabbed Ashley's head and shoved it against my shoulder so he didn't see what was going to happen. In a few seconds, that proved to be a very good idea. "Fuck off." Those were the last words the guy ever said. The mouth slipped down on the mask. It glided along the metal as if it wasn't moving on a solid surface. With frightening speed, the creature bent over, half-moon mouth opening wide to fit the guy's entire head inside. I heard screaming from the small group as the head came off, blood spraying everywhere. Ashley wanted to raise his head, but I kept a firm hold on him. He started trembling, terrified of what sights I refused to let him see. I opened my mouth to scream for help from the crowd. The words died in my throat as I saw everyone else not paying any attention to what had just happened. That monster quickly got down on all fours to devour the guy's body, blood and gore flying as he did so. The attack only lasting a few seconds. And yet, no one looked in that direction. "Ashley, we need to go," I yelled, starting to drag him away. "Why? What's wrong?" I heard a snapping sound as soon as the world shifted and changed. I almost felt too dizzy to stand up. Looking around, I saw we were in the same spot, but the masked creature and all the blood simply disappeared. The group of Ashley's friends were missing a person but acting as if nothing happened. I held his wrist, trying to drag him away when everything changed. His face a little concerned over my panicked state. Ashley honestly didn't remember the last few minutes like everyone else besides myself. He thought I just needed to use the washroom. That deep-fried Mars bar proved to be a very bad idea. I dragged him along to the washrooms and risked leaving Ashley alone for a few minutes so I could puke up everything I ate that day. I needed to think. What the hell happened? How did no one else remember what we saw? Pulling out my phone, I didn't know what I needed to do for a second. Call the cops? Without proof, I sounded crazy. There wasn't even any blood left behind. Nothing. On a hunch, I looked up the guy's name on Facebook. It took me a few minutes to remember it. Searching through related friends, I finally found his photo, but it stumbled on a page set up in his honor. My blood ran cold. According to the Facebook page, he died in a car accident before we graduated high school. That wasn't possible. I just saw him die a few minutes ago. A noise came from the outside stall, and I nearly dropped my phone in fear. I sat on the floor when I puked and hadn't gotten up yet, so I saw the feet poking out from the torn sheet under the stall door. Looking up, I spotted the masked creature very rudely staring down over the top of the stall. "You shouldn't be in the woman's washroom," I said in a trembling voice, hoping that would make him leave. The smile was still upside down, so I assumed I was safe for a moment. I held up my phone, still displaying the Facebook page, trying to get answers. While I sat alone in the stall, I realized something terrible I should have noticed sooner. I didn't remember going to the fair. I should be at work that day. For some reason, not only did my job not call me, but I had no memories of getting up that morning to come here. "Am I already dead?" I asked the creature. I thought I heard it laugh. There goes the theory that this was some sort of limbo for the dead. This thing could change the past and bring people to this fair. But for what reason did it drag us here? It wasn't eating everyone it came across. How limited were its powers? I had a million questions and not much to go on. "Fun?" The question in that terrible voice echoed through the washroom. Did it ask me if I was having fun? I was until I saw him eat a man. "Well, not right now. I'm a bit freaked out to have fun," I admitted, knowing that might not be a good answer. "Have fun." Without giving me a chance to reply, it turned and walked away, each step making a sound on the tile floor. I was stunned, to say the least. What was the point of this place? The point of the day? To have fun and whoever didn't got to eaten? For some reason, I noticed this creature and remembered what it did while the rest of the people here didn't. If those memories didn't fade, I was as good as dead by the end of the day. And taking a deep breath, I needed to focus. If my fate was already sealed, at least I could save Ashley. He didn't remember the masked creature and could still make it out of here. I turned off my phone and made my way back outside to meet up to him. I told him it was the junk food not sitting right and I felt fine now. I took his hand feeling scared to death but tried my best to not let it show in my face. He accepted his hand being held by someone who was mostly a stranger to him. Whatever else happened, I needed to make sure he had fun today. We walked around and I paid close attention to what he was looking at, trying to get a grasp of what he wanted to do. The bigger rides were out of the question. Along the way to a massive slide he appeared interested in, his eyes drifted to a pile of stuffed hippos that could be won from the games. They honestly were the ugliest toy in the entire place. The fabric a shiny pink and their eyes crossed. But if he wanted it, I would get him one. The game with the ugly hippos appeared to be a simple one. Just ring the bell with a hammer. I paid for a few tries, wondering if I could even get this damn hippo for him. The guy running the game let Ashley go first. He acted a little embarrassed by the fact he didn't even get the wait halfway. The guy running the stall humored me and I took the oversized hammer. I slammed down the hammer, picturing I smashed the masked face with all the strength in my arms. The bell rang and both men stood shocked. I may be a bit shorter than them both, but a lifetime of working and now doing 2 years of a job with heavy lifting paid off. In a few short minutes, Ashley had his hippo. His face flushed at carrying the ugly thing around. I wish he had better taste. At least he smiled. That's really all that mattered. We walked through the area with the games. Between some booths, I spotted the masked creature gladly gobbling up another person as no one else noticed. A cruel reminder of my fate by the time the day ended. How could anyone have fun with that thing walking around? Ashley noticed my mood. We stopped by another game and I watched as he sat down to play. He picked the game with a bunch of water guns. Without enough people, the game couldn't get started. So, he paid for a few kids passing by to join him. I watched with a small smile almost appearing on my face as he did his best to win at least one round. But he got pretty happy when others beat him. It felt nice seeing the guy who got bullied all through high school finally having a good day. How often did he let himself just be happy like this? As prizes were won, I think the guy running the booth gave Ashley a pity prize. He handed him a stuffed pink elephant that matched the hippo. He gladly took it and paid for a few more rounds to be covered for anyone random walking by to play before he walked over with 2 toys in hand. Holding out the elephant, he smiled as he offered the plush to me. That's the biggest smile I'd ever seen on him so far. He put all that effort into winning something from me after noticing how I was feeling. If I didn't hear the distant screams of someone being eaten, I would have thought this was one of the best days I've had in a long time. The hours passed by as less and less people were at the fair. One would assume they were going home, but I knew the real reason. The moment they weren't having fun for a second, they were gobbled up. I didn't know why I lasted the day. Every moment tense, knowing that masked creature could appear from my life at any second. As the sun started to set, a fireworks show got announced to end the night. Ashley appeared excited for it and hurried us over to get a good spot. Not once did he mention the friends he came with. Did he even still remember them? How many of them were left? He wasn't at any risk of being eaten. I thought he had more fun than anyone else at the fair that day. I even heard him laugh a few times. During the day, I knew I started to love him, but not in a romantic sense. I've never wanted to date anyone. Holding hands was fine. Anything beyond that made my skin crawl. And yet my chest had some warm moments between the fear by just seeing him happy. Just before the fireworks started, I excused myself to the washroom. I saw the masked creature standing nearby. If he wanted to eat me, I didn't want it to happen in front of my new friend, even if he would forget it afterwards. The few moments of fear and stress, something I didn't want to put Ashley through. I walked into the washroom, and I stood in front of the mirror, waiting. I heard the footsteps before I saw the creature. He stopped right behind me, the tall form hard to see in the dull light of the bathroom. He didn't move closer to ask the question I dreaded all day. Having fun? I let the words fall between us as I tried to figure out my feelings. No, I wasn't having fun. I felt terrified. I didn't want to die, but I didn't think I've ever had a fun day in my entire life. Honestly, no, not really. But I've always been like this. I don't think I've ever been fully happy before. This may be the most I've enjoyed myself, but I don't think my feelings are normal. I've always accepted this neutral state of mind. If you kill me for that, could you at least let Ashley remember this day? I know he enjoyed himself, and I want him to keep this memory. I told it, unsure of what the monster would do. The creature listened patiently for my answer. It might be the longest response he'd ever gotten. That mouth started to drift down until the half-moon shape was at the bottom of the mask. My entire body tensed up, waiting for whatever might happen next. A large, thin hand fell on my shoulder. The creature smiled wide with the mouth lined with countless teeth. I held my breath, waiting for the end. Then everything went black. A sound woke me up. Pings from my phone going off. I jumped awake. Looking around stunned, I sat in my bed safe and sound. Grabbing my phone, I looked at the texts coming in. Ashley sent me a few photos. Some blurry ones of fireworks and a final one of a selfie with a stupid stuffed hippo in frame. That day did happen. He mentioned in his messages that he just woke up and wanted to send me photos from yesterday. I didn't even remember getting home or giving him my number. I somehow stayed alive. That creature spared me, but why? I looked over to see the elephant sitting on my computer desk, staring at me with shiny black eyes. Ashley sent me another message thanking me for the day and asking for us to go back to the fair next year. I cared about him, but that wasn't going to happen. We could hang out anywhere but that place. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the pink stuffed toy moving, and to my horror, the head slowly started to run upside down. "See you next. Yeah," came a croaking voice from the toy. I scooped up the dumb-looking pink elephant and tossed it in the back of my closet, then shoved my dresser in front of the door. It seemed I needed to work my ass off to make sure Ashley had no reason to ever go back to that awful fair ever again. A box of letters was recently discovered in a ghost town within the arid and chilly mountainous region of northern Colombia. These letters have likely gone unread for at least 3 decades. They are just a small part of a larger trove of records, correspondence, and personal journals concerning the events in a place where copper miners and their families once lived. The population peaked at about 1,000 people in 1930, but as the ore veins dried up, families left for the modernizing cities on the coast. In 1974, the country's Revolutionary Armed Forces spread into the region, bringing their criminal operations and anarchic violence too close for comfort and signaling the end of a community. State records indicate that only a few dozen people remained in the town by 1985, and most of them seem to have been scavengers picking at the bones of the mines for any remaining metals. Working alone with crude tools, there came a point where more of the locals were dying or disappearing instead of leaving. However, there was one holdout of organized civilization that continued to exist until the very end. A small orphanage run out of an 18th century Catholic mission by Sister Liliana. She is young, born in 1960 according to her papers. The most important of the discovered letters detail what transpired in the last 2 months of 1986, revealing what almost became a forgotten story, covered up and nearly lost to time. In its wake are many questions, terrifying possibilities, and further possible incidents that have, as of now, gone undiscovered. Instead of saying too much on the outset, I've translated the most relevant letters sent between Sister Liliana and a state worker named Hernando Gomez, who at the same time was assigned to perform monthly welfare checks on the orphanage. He worked in the closest major city, over 60 miles away. Also mixed among the letters were responses from Sister Marta, an older friend and mentor from Liliana's convent. Letters sent to Sister Marta, who passed away several years ago, have yet to be found and may be lost. The mountain town did not have any phone service, meaning that nearly all communication went through what must have been a slow mail service. Presented in chronological order, I believe it best to begin with a request to the state from Sister Liliana, postmarked November 3rd, 1986.
Mr. Gomez, this is the 3rd time I've asked to be transferred to a proper orphanage in a nearby city. I have been patient and dutifully continued my caretaking of the children this past year, but the situation is worsening here, and I am at my wit's end. The groundskeeper recently quit, leaving me with only 2 volunteer helpers that are far from dependable, and with colder weather on the way, I have even more reason to be concerned about the condition of a place that will no longer even be properly maintained. Please, no more red tape. Talk to whomever you need to and send us a bus as soon as possible. On your next visit, I hope to hear some good news for a change. I know that the partisan militia has reached deeper into the mountains, and I've heard stories of the roadblocks and bandit-like activity, but surely someone in the government isn't too afraid to send escorted transportation for the sake of these children, or give us a helicopter if the roads sound too treacherous. If you and the mail can still come up here on occasion, surely you can bring me something larger that will seat 11 of us. And while I hesitate to complain about my important position, I feel that I should mention the tedium which has set in among the children. They've become quite the group of troublemakers. At the very least, please bring some more books to read, whatever you can find or might have on hand. The books we do have are in tatters, and we lost another one several days ago when Daniela ripped out its last remaining pages and burnt them using a stolen matchbook. If she had done it to find some heat in this drafty old building, I might understand. But I'm certain she only did it to entertain her rebellious friends. I wish you well, and take care.
A letter arrives from Sister Marta a few days later, before Mr. Gomez has had a chance to read this appeal. It's obvious that Sister Liliana had recently asked for advice or help from her mentor. It reads,
My dearest Liliana, I've always said that in times of trouble, God is either testing our worth, teaching us an important life lesson, or both. Reflect on the fact that those children, whether abandoned or having lost their families, rely on you no matter how they may treat you on a daily basis. One day, they will grow up and look back at your caretaking with gratitude. And I have faith that they'll become better people than these so-called freedom fighters attempting to overthrow this country. Be wary of them. I've heard from several of the other sisters that their attacks on civilians have included missionaries and even the local clergy. I fear that this world has gone mad. As you know, I've recently lost family of my own back in Romania. People cry out for freedom and think it gives them permission to harm the innocent or anyone with different points of view. There is always a bed here waiting for you, but those children and your work come first. Try not to fault Mr. Gomez. His department, like many government agencies, are either underfunded or suffer from corruption. You've made him out to sound like one of the good men who truly sympathizes with your plight, yet whose hands are tied and can't help in all the ways you wish he could. I doubt that the disciplinary incident that occurred several months ago is relevant to his inaction. Rest assured that I am still seeking out a bus and a driver for you, but it appears that there are few people in the city who are as capable and strong as you. Those misguided rebels have them scared. Until then, stay strong. Your tribulations will last only as long as you are meant to endure them and will prepare you all the better for future struggles.
Hernando's response to Liliana, written using a typewriter in the thinnest stationery his department could provide, arrived shortly thereafter. It is kept as pristine as all of the lonely sister's other letters, despite what must have been a contentious relationship between the two.
Miss Ramiro, as always, I assure you that your voice has not gone unheard in these crowded offices. I do what I can for you, and hundreds of other needy citizens and public workers on each one of the 6 days of the week I come in and work for 12 hours. No, I'm not looking for pity or making excuses, but I felt it fair to remind you how busy and understaffed we are at this department. You haven't been forgotten, and I'm coming up to you in only a few days from now to check on the orphanage. If I can't bring a large vehicle to you by then, we will at least have a chance to talk face to face about your options. I wouldn't expect a helicopter to come and get all of you anytime soon. The government has its hands tied up in other matters even more than usual, thanks to gang violence of kids pretending to be freedom fighters. Your children, on the other hand, I can empathize with. It was never a town, if you can even call it one, made with them in mind. Exhausted, rugged copper miners who had nowhere else to go after a long workday than a bar with a brothel upstairs will inevitably result in unwanted little ones that grow into troubled adolescents. I don't wish to infer that we should give up on them. I'm sure that you could find a way out on your own and leave them behind, but you haven't done that yet, and I don't think you could live with yourself if you did. I'll end this letter with a word of advice, coming from a father of 3. To cool their tempers, promise them rewards for their good behaviors instead of punishing them for their misdeeds. Candy, old abandoned toys that might still be up there, whatever you can find. Do not escalate things. Despite what most people say, physical punishment of any kind does not work and only breeds resentment and mistrust. And don't ever burn any of their hands on the stovetop again. If I ever see that a second time, I really will have to report you for it. And I know it was just a mistake made during a fit of anger, and it would never happen again. But whenever I see such things happen with other caretakers, I can't help but remind them to do better in the future. Should an incident repeat, it looks bad for me too. I'll see you soon. Be well.
For some reason, an unsent letter to Sister Marta was found under her Nando's in the stack. Liliana wanted to let off some steam to her mentor and mentioned that she couldn't believe he was still bringing up the burning incident. But then she started rambling and treating the letter more like a diary, and likely realizing its uselessness, decided to keep the rest of her emotions inside and stop writing halfway. Though I wonder why she kept it. Around a week later, and following the visit from Hernando, Liliana sent another message to him and received one from Sister Marta. Both are concerning for different reasons.
Mr. Gomez, you saw firsthand how bad things are getting here on your recent visit. Even the food shipments are no longer reliable, and the scarcity is driving up prices to the point where I am feeding the children only the bare essentials, and no one wants to donate anything better to us. It can't be that hard to get some decades-old bus at the mountain to get us out. I'm starting to think it's more hopeless than just that. Is there no more room in the other orphanages? Anywhere in the country? I understand people not wanting to adopt and put more pressure on their families in this political climate, but all I'm asking for now is somewhere to stay. Maybe 10 children don't mean much to the rest of Colombia, but there is a crisis building regardless of the number. I apologize if I am even more forward than usual in this letter, and I can already see that my handwriting is messy from my anger and worry. Last night, I experienced terror. At some point early in the morning, I was awoken by the sound of truck engines. They were loud and shook the air, causing the children to stir. By some small miracle, I managed to keep them all in their beds as I investigated. I'm uncertain if it was from fear or divine guidance, but I didn't use a lantern on my way to one of the few windows in the mission that hadn't been boarded up, instead navigating by moonlight. Had I done so, the glow may have given myself away, and it's possible I would not have survived the ordeal that was brought into our small town. Thank God I also leave no lights on throughout the building at night. To the people that invaded us, our orphanage may as well have been an abandoned husk, unoccupied for years. It was those rebels, Mr. Gomez. I've asked others, but no one seems to know of their business here, or at least is too afraid to tell me. They arrived in 4 of their trucks and outpoured a dozen or so men, all heavily armed, yelling and barking orders outside of the tavern, the only establishment still open at that hour. I watched by the window, too afraid to move, as they went inside and came back out minutes later, dragging an older man named Ernesto across the dirt. I've seldom spoken with him and know little of his past, and couldn't begin to guess as to why they wanted him specifically. The rebels dragged the poor man to one of their trucks and tossed him inside the cabin. Several of the brutes fired their automatic weapons into the night air as a display of their perceived power, or as a warning, just before their trucks took off, the tires tearing apart our simple muddy streets. The men were in such a hurry that some of their belongings slid out of their vehicles during their exit and littered the street. I'm not sure what most of it is. It all looks like stolen equipment from somewhere, but I haven't gotten close enough to identify any of it, and everyone's been told not to come near the material. I suppose the others worry that the thieves will come back to reclaim it. So when dawn broke, It was all locked up in one of our 2 jail cells. They think if someone gets their hands on the equipment and tries to sell it, we might all be in danger when those men return. So we're holding the loot for criminals instead. I'm honestly losing faith in the people I once called neighbours. I don't know the purpose of this letter. Nothing will be done about any of this, and if anything, our latest incident will only make your people more hesitant to move us off of these foothills. But if the entire town disappears one day, you'll know what group of people was behind it.
And from Sister Marta, a short and simple response to a letter that may have been similar to the previous one left unsent.
Liliana, it is common for people to judge us for a wrong we have committed in the past. Others sometimes simplify a complicated life down to one mistake and believe it says everything about our character. But being upset with Mr. Gomez because he brought up something that happened with a stovetop and hands left unwashed for dinner will not help matters. All you can do is continue to pursue good deeds in your life and show him that you have changed for the better since then. Given time, he will no longer feel the need to judge you for it. Even so, I must insist that you continue to work on your weakness with your anger. Remember that you are passionate with pleasing others and showing compassion and empathy. But perhaps you expect too much reciprocity. In your position, a simple thank you for your work should be sufficient. Do not look for anything greater from your young charges. What do you wish them to offer you at their age? You have too great a need to be respected and shown gratitude, when you should be able to feel fulfillment on your own through your actions. Do not forget all that I taught you. Better days will come.
Having gone to a Catholic school myself, I'm well aware that many who serve the faith can have short fuses and pent-up, unfulfilled desires. Liliana was probably at a time in her life when she felt like she was wasting time in a place that was equally unforgiving, dull, and now dangerous. She felt trapped. It's understandable. I'm not important to this story, but I also grew up in that town and was Liliana's age in 1986, though I left with my family earlier on when it was starting to collapse. I was asked to help the investigation on what ultimately happened to be the place, and I was the one that found Liliana's stash of letters and helped decode them, as her handwriting is not easily legible. Mr. Gomez sent a response that isn't really worth copying over, in which he basically reminds Liliana of his limitations as a government employee and tries to reassure her once again that she hasn't been forgotten, this time adding that the presence of revolutionaries wouldn't deter any efforts to get her and the orphans out. It all comes down to logistical issues, he explains. But there was something about that night when they abducted Ernesto that changed everything in the dying town and began a chain of events that greatly hastened its demise. Likely seeing that her letters had achieved nothing so far, Liliana seemed to hesitate before penning her next one to Mr. Gomez, which reached his desk 2 weeks after his visit. Her descriptions of the occurrences that followed are quite detailed and disturbing. This is the first troubling letter in Mr. Gomez's files, and it's a wonder that they weren't passed on to someone higher up in government and classified sooner. He must have been unable to see the full picture of what was transpiring. It reads like a disaster report and has a tone of desperation right at the start when Liliana addresses him by his first name.
Hernando, a curse has come upon this town. Things were already so bad here that I hesitated to write simply to relay more of our troubles, which I'm sure you've heard more than enough about. But I can't ignore what's happening. 2 weeks have passed since your visit, and everything has gotten much worse. It started a few days after those misguided revolutionaries terrorized us. One after the next, and within the span of 24 hours, all of the children caught a vicious stomach bug. They couldn't hold down anything, not even warm broth. I thought maybe their room had gotten too cold one night and given them all a nasty chill, yet they haven't even complained about the lack of warmth like they usually do prior to their illness. Whatever had afflicted them passed quickly, lasting no more than 48 hours, although a few of the children showed sporadic symptoms for several days afterwards. One night they would be fine, and the next they'd be expelling acrid fluids before feeling all right again within hours. I'm sorry for using such a visual description, but the smell of sick lingers here in the air, to the point where you may get a whiff of it from this paper, so I thought it best to explain. Ill children I can manage, despite the accompanying sights, sounds and smells. I'm good at caretaking. If you recall me telling you, I was practicing to become a nurse until I lost my parents and finances and found myself owing a life debt to the convent for helping me get back on my feet. And perhaps it's terrible of me to say, but at least sick kids settle down for a time. I wouldn't be writing this letter if it stopped at a simple spread of a bug. A few days after they had recovered, the town's elderly owner of the general store became sick as well. Seriously so, from what I've heard. We lack a proper doctor here, forcing him to drive to the nearest city for care. He is known to be a bit of a grouch, especially when it comes to children, so I was disappointed but not surprised when the orphans seemed to take some delight in the news. How cruel they can be sometimes. Though, admittedly, when I was young, I also perceived certain adults as enemies and was pleased by their occasional misfortune. Kids can be like that, what with their narrow view of the world. It's sinful, but forgivable and teachable, I believe. However, it's what they did next that stretches the limits of forgiveness. God help me. These children snuck out one night and broke into the store, taking food and whatever else their grubby little hands could pilfer. Normally the owner is sleeping in his home directly above the shop, and he sleeps so lightly that he frequently wakes up and yells out his windows if there's the slightest commotion on the street. And the instant he's out of town, my children become brazen enough to steal from him, a sick man who provides for this community. I couldn't believe it when I found out. It was obvious that they were up to no good the next day, as they were acting like they had just gotten away with a scheme. Louis, the youngest, gave it all away when he came to dinner with chocolate smeared around his mouth. He falls apart when caught in a lie, and it didn't take me long to find their stolen stash of sweets, snacks, and everyday objects they must have considered close enough to being toys, since the store doesn't sell actual toys. I was livid, to say the least, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't even punish them at first. Doing so has never really worked. I just made them return everything that wasn't edible or that they hadn't opened yet. There was always one form of discipline that I've kept in my arsenal for just the right moment, and I thought about trying it after our visit to the store. I believed that if I put the children in a jail cell for an hour or so, they might have the chance to see a possible path that their lives were taking. But I wasn't given that option. When we went to the police station, I found our only 2 officers helplessly watching a group of men, roughneck former miners who think they run this town, as they carried off the stolen equipment that we had secured in the jail cell. They glared at me on their way out, as if they were annoyed at my presence, all while the children watched. "Don't judge us, sister," one of them said. "They aren't coming back for any of this. They've forgotten all about it by now." It's so easy to reason away our behavior. I didn't ask what they were doing with any of those machines and tools. Going to another town to sell it, I suppose, for more money to waste on alcohol. And here I was, trying to teach these children a lesson on thievery. They must have only learned that if you're loud and threatening enough, you can take whatever you want. Though I did get a look at the material for the first time, I recognised most of it from my time at nursing school. It was all medical equipment. The revolutionaries must have broken into a hospital, whether it had been closed for years or was still open and operating. This would not come as a surprise. Those violent men act as shamelessly as my young wards. I hope you can look into this if you get a moment. I feel so powerless. The people here have given up, and I'm not sure how much longer the civility of this place will last. Just before I was about to drop off this letter this morning, more illnesses were reported. The mail truck will be arriving shortly, so forgive the hastiness of this edition. 2 men were found passed out in a gutter at dawn, apparently in a sort of stupor and feeling unwell. To put it bluntly, they are known as the town drunks, but it sounds like they were kind of in a worse state than usual. They show at Mass, no doubt to try and find weekly absolution, yet otherwise often cause trouble and have spent many nights in jail. They seem to loathe my children in particular and speak poorly of them, even in God's house on Sundays, and directly to their faces. The one place I bring them once a week to instill some structure in their lives, and they get called street rats, or worse. I won't weep for these men, and would call it divine punishment if it weren't for one of my aides finding herself stricken by this spreading plague as well. When she woke up yesterday morning, she felt feverish and complained of a burning sensation. Once it was clear that she was too weak to help me, I sent her home for some bed rest. She is elderly and short-tempered, and the children have never really cared for her. But what am I supposed to do now? The only person I have left assisting me is the woman who cooks the meals. I'm at my wit's end. Please get us off of this barren hill.
In response, Mr. Gomez replied with a short letter that must have frustrated her even more, yet also offered some degree of hope.
Sister Liliana, I've arranged for a doctor to visit you, the children, and the other locals in town. He'll be bringing a variety of medicines to hopefully control what seems to be an outbreak. You may ask how I manage this, yet can't pull off sending a bus to you. Well, it's simple. The doctor is an old friend and isn't scared of anything, so he didn't hesitate to agree to come to you. I'm confident he'll be able to help. Your information about the medical equipment is helpful. The police are investigating a possible incident, the nearest city to the town. They are also looking into Mesto, and I believe they're actively searching for him. I do have one piece of good news. Someone much higher up than I am finally took notice of your predicament and has assured me that he's working on a proposal that should reach President Vargas' desk. It sounds too good to be true, but if the government feels like there's something to publicly gain by moving heaven and earth to bring all of you into civilization, they may just go through with some grand plan. So, don't give up yet. I'll be in contact as soon as I hear something. Take care.
A letter from Sister Marta was delivered at the same time.
Dear Liliana, remember that I am always praying for you during challenging times. I am certain that these illnesses will be overcome through both modern medicine and our faith. It may seem that God has forsaken you, but I know that isn't the case. It is natural to reach out and try to grasp at any easy solution when we struggle, and I understand the reasons behind your wishes. That said, I don't think it will be possible to convince a priest to come up there and consecrate the grounds. This is already an irregular request, and it wouldn't be done to rid an area of evil spirits. You should already know this. There are worldly reasons for disease and misfortune too. I hope that this care package helps you and the children. Please write back as soon as your situation changes in either direction.
The contents of the care package which came with the letter are lost to time. What we do know is that Mr. Gomez's final personal meeting with Liliana in the middle of December did not go well. She sends him a letter immediately afterwards, and her words are nearly indecipherable angry scribbles. She had to say some things that she didn't during the visit, needing the chance to properly defend herself.
I've taken a day to gather my thoughts before writing you again. But admittedly, I'm not very clear-headed. I will try to keep this from devolving into rambling incoherence, but I'm struggling to find the right words to explain how ridiculous all of this is, and I feel like I've had too many accusations lobbed at me to count. To begin with, of course I wasn't going to mention the burns on the children's hands in my previous letter. You'd have come up here with your mind already made up about me. But I made no attempt to hide the burns from you during your inspection. My own hand to God, I haven't hurt any of my wards since the first time I made that terrible mistake. Our cook fully attested as such. And furthermore, I would waste precious stove fuel to punish the children like that again, especially not when it did far more harm than good last time. And while your doctor was kind enough to refill our first aid kit and essential medicines, as someone with medical knowledge myself, I have to disagree with his assessment. He believes we've been afflicted by a common disease and recovery will come with proper bed rest, despite my insistence that I've never heard of such symptoms manifesting. Aside from a loss of appetite and fatigue, the burns on their palms and other areas of their bodies don't seem to be healing, despite first appearing weeks ago. The damaged skin is the worst on their hands, with coin-sized bright red marks appearing in various spots. I'd be tempted to compare it to a form of stigmata if I subscribed to the belief of such a supernatural occurrence. Included is a copy of the medical notes the doctor made for each child. I've asked so much of you already, but please look into these symptoms so that perhaps I can get a second opinion. I'm not faulting the doctor and his diagnosis. The children may simply be sick with something he's never seen before. I have no one else to turn to, Mr. Gomez. I'm sure that you can see my desperation in my penmanship.
The attached medical papers are unaccounted for, either having been misplaced long ago or locked away in some other classified government file. Records indicate that Mr. Gomez sent his next letter through priority mail, which may have gotten it to Liliana a few days earlier than usual. As if it was important to save even just a few seconds, he skips any written formalities this time and gets right into his instructions.
Liliana, you gave me enough information to get me started on a theory about what's going on up there, but I'm not certain of anything yet, and I don't want to make the situation worse with bad advice. I'll send a follow-up letter very soon and renew the urgency concerning your situation with my superiors. Until then, follow these directions carefully. Tell me, are there any new unfamiliar objects that you've seen recently? Anything that could possibly come from the stolen equipment that was left behind? If you haven't seen something strange and unfamiliar to you, then perhaps the children have mentioned it in passing when they think you weren't listening. If they got their hands on a new, let's call it a toy, they might not have told you about it. I have to emphasize, think about any objects you may have heard about recently, no matter how plain or small it may be. If you find such an out-of-place thing, or get the kids to tell you where they hid it, do not touch it if it's metallic or inside any sort of container with a leaf-like trefoil symbol on it. Don't use your hands and treat it like poison. Wear gloves and use a tool or kitchen utensils to move it outside and bury it in an unmarked hole in the ground that you will be able to locate again. You might find something that is, in fact, perfectly safe, but at this point, it's time to treat anything suspicious as dangerous. Also, Be careful around anything this object might have touched. Treat it like a poison that contaminates everything near it. Be safe.
There is also news from Sister Marta that likely arrived at the same time. It's the last one we found from her in Liliana's box of letters.
Dearest Liliana, I am writing you from a hospital, but do not concern yourself over my health, not when you are going through so many challenges. I have felt unwell for the past few days and decided to take precautions, thinking it best to have my condition monitored in a place where I can rest. I am feeling confident that I will recover soon. I don't wish to worry you. I've just always found it best to share medical events with close friends and family in case the worst outcome should happen, not that I expect such an outcome. I have little else to do at this hospital other than write letters, although I'm sure that it will take longer to send or receive them while I'm here. But never mind any delays in our correspondence. I've always enjoyed catching up on your retellings of what those little troublemakers of yours have been doing. When you first arrived at the mission, you had stars in your eyes and saw a light and purpose in your life. Your descriptions of the vista view from the town inspired me to come see it for myself, and I regret I was never able to make the trip. The adults there may have lost their way, but I believe that deep down, most of them appreciate what you've done in giving their forgotten youth guidance and a matriarchal voice in life. They may simply be too worried and involved with their own wants to remember to convey that appreciation. You are always loved by your charges and those of us back home at the convent. The long days at your post will not last forever, and at some point, you and those children will be free to leave a dying community and explore the world. You could always begin the next part of your journey by taking a well-earned rest here with the other sisters and tell them some of your many stories. I very much look forward to seeing you again. If I don't get the chance to send another letter in time, I hope you have a lovely Christmas. Thank you for sending me a scarf for the colder weather coming our way. It must have taken you a while to knit. I'm sure doing so kept you happily busy.
Liliana's next response to Hernando was received a week later, and with the truth it brings, an alarming series of events comes to light. Her handwriting in this one is in stark contrast to her previous letter. The strokes are slow and deliberate, but also faint, like she suddenly lacked the strength to press her pen fully to the paper. Or maybe she was just feeling unhappy, regretful, or resigned. Her spirit seems to have been broken at some point.
Mr. Gomez, as hard as I looked, I was unable to find the object you described, yet I don't think I want to. Even so, I believe I've all but confirmed its existence. The children confessed. Minutes after I received your last letter, I began to feverishly search for a strange metal as you advised. I looked at all of the orphans' usual hiding places throughout the mission. I checked their sheets, overturned their beds, scoured the cabinets and dressers. I explored the grounds for any places they may have buried something and felt around in the old dead trees where they've stashed away things they didn't want me to find before. After a couple of hours or so with the sick children watching me all the while, it occurred to them that I was trying to find something they once had in their possession, or which they never should have had. I don't understand what this object is, or where it came from, or what it does, but it sounds like a profane idol of some sort, an ungodly relic. I would have avoided such an object entirely the moment I understood that it could spread a poison through the air itself. But the children, I can't understand what's gotten into them. How could they not imagine the danger to themselves and their caretakers, and instead only see its sinister potential? It pains me to say it, but they carry vengeance in their hearts, even at such an age. God, Forgive me for not teaching them better. Though they didn't know the totality of what they did, their actions are still reprehensible. They found your object in the street a day after the revolutionaries gave us a visit, the tyre tracks still fresh. They were enthralled by what I would call its odd properties. Daniela liked it the most and kept it to herself at first. That may explain why she seems to be the sickest of the children. Instead of telling me and bringing me what they found, they kept it hidden away in one of their secret places. I haven't the strength anymore to look for it, and I believe them when they told me they got rid of it already anyway. If only they had shared all of this much sooner, when we still had time. They named it their evil sparkling thing. They called it evil, and yet they still treated it like a fascinating little toy. I'm out of words to describe the ways in which they think. It was a small metal circular stone, about the size of a bottle cap, but much heavier. Who knew such a tiny thing could cause so much pain? I have never heard of such a poison. Is it something science created? I grew up in the countryside, in an ascetic household. I was later isolated from a cruel world in the convent. I purposely kept myself ignorant of the darkness around us out of fear, to try and avoid the stress from worrying over things I couldn't change. That darkness caught up with me anyway. As they described it, the sparkling thing gave off a peculiar luster, and it made enough of its own heat to warm their cold hands on a chilly night. They treated it like some magical charm instead of an abomination. Even when it started making them sick, they became more interested in how they could use it against others instead of worrying about their own health. To everyone who had slighted them in the past, they saw a chance for some puerile payback. One after the next, they listed their victims. Some of the children cried as they revealed their guilt. There were different ringleaders for each of their targets, and peer pressure kept everyone reined in. First was the elderly store owner. They wanted him out of the way so they could steal from him. During one of our visits, they slipped their poison into the pocket of his coat, which hangs by the door until he puts it on later, either when it gets cold in the shop or he leaves at the end of the day. They retrieved it several days later on another visit. The children couldn't imagine that he would get sick enough to need to go to hospital, they tell me. And yet, the news only encouraged them to inflict further harm. The object was later snuck between the town drunks during Sunday Mass, where it remained without the pair knowing for all of 2 hours. Now that I look back on that day, I can recall them both limping out afterwards. It must have burned their legs through the fabric of their clothing, likely too high up for amputation to be an option should it come to that. Will such an operation be the only way to save their lives at some point? I don't know enough about these burns. The children still have yet to heal, and their red spots seem to grow more painful each day. These injuries and illnesses are slow and insidious. I pray they also aren't irreparable. Surely these ailments can't last the rest of our lives. When they poisoned the elderly woman who helps me, despite not at all being liked by the children, they did so by leaving their sparkling thing inside her personal food cupboard overnight. All it took to make her gravely ill was a piece of metal kept by her boxed provisions, and somehow it turned them toxic and yet didn't change the taste enough for her to notice. How is this possible? And it gets worse still. The children sickened 2 other people in town that I hadn't heard about. In fact, they did so over a month ago, shortly after they first realised what they had done to the store owner and saw that the power they possessed could bring down even healthy adults. Lord, give me strength. Daniela still had a father. He was a layabout and addicted to gambling to the point where he threw away what little money he made at card games instead of trying to make a better life for himself and his daughter. She's the only one among the children who wasn't truly an orphan. She just had nowhere else to go. Over the years, the others would often treat her differently because she still had a parent, even one uninterested in her. She must have felt like an outsider at times, different, separated. So she decided to change that. One night, she snuck into her estranged father's home and placed the object in his pillow. The man already slept for 12 hours a day from what I've heard, and she didn't retrieve the evil little thing until 3 days had passed. After she told me what she'd done, I alerted the local authorities, and he was found in his bed with severe burns and skin and hair peeling off of his head this morning. But that isn't what killed him. He had choked to death on his own blood. Maybe there was nothing to be done for him, but he had shut himself up in his home for all that time and must have died only recently. I apologize for painting such a vivid and grotesque picture, but it's all I have left. My pleas and concerns have gone unheard, and now I find myself surrounded by rot and death. When I told Daniela of her father's passing, she didn't seem at all affected. She appeared cold, without emotion, only telling me that she was sorry if anyone misses him. I asked her then and there if she or any of the others had ever tried to poison me. She replied with an emphatic no, they would never do that. I was the closest person they had to a mother. I was strict but kind and patient. And there was yet one more life in this town that they had come to not feel so warmly about. One of their own. Little Louis. To the others, he was always like an annoying little brother, but still one of them, to a point. They blamed him for me finding out about their snack stash, which eventually led to the discovery of what they were doing to the people who live here. He had also wanted to tell me everything. He had gotten scared about the sudden, vengeful nature among his peers, the illnesses, the loss of hope among them, which they had traded for the tempting sinfulness that was already a pestilence among this community, and for wanting to turn to me for help, which at one point the children had never hesitated to do. They poisoned him. With tears in their eyes, the kids he once considered friends admitted everything. Except for Daniela. She seems to have no remorse, and maybe she never had any. I think she's come to hate this world. To punish Louis for just thinking about betraying them, the children pinned him to the floor and forced him to swallow their poison. That's how small the deadly thing is. I can't begin to imagine what it did to him while it was in his stomach for several hours, before it made him so sick that he threw it back up. It makes sense now why he suddenly became so weak. He's bleeding from his mouth and nose, losing hair, can't keep anything down, bedridden. I'm unsure how long he'll last, or how much he'll suffer. The other children now see for themselves what they've done to others, and to someone close to them. Some of the Orthans had a crisis of conscience after that, and at the risk of furthering Daniela's wrath, they finally disposed of their sparkling thing by tossing it off the mountainside and into one of the ravines around us. She'll never find her precious idol again, and I lost my chance to ever lay my eyes on it. From my perspective, it's like it never existed. And like my wards were all struck down by a mysterious, unknowable malady. But I believe all of it. Everyone, save for Daniela and Louis, too weak to speak to me at this point, poured their souls out and begged me for forgiveness. But it's not me who can provide it. If they want mercy for their terrible behavior, they'll need to look deep into their hearts and seek it from the Almighty. And yet I still love them. I have to. Unconditionally. Because no one else in this world will. The system failed them. And I also failed them. Mr. Gomez, I don't know if I'll be able to write another letter. The condition in which I find myself a week or two from now may be a perilous one. Please do a favor for me and check in with Sister Marta at the hospital. She is a dear friend and mentor who pulled me out of a dark time. I fear that I may have sickened her with a handmade gift. Take care of those close to you and be thankful of their good health. The next time you come up here, you may happen upon a graveyard instead of a town. But know that I don't blame you. May you offer help to others in my place. Liliana.
Liliana, all is not
Without
lost.
commentary,
Depending on everyone's
Hernandez
dosage of
responds.
radiation, the symptoms may soon pass. With the object no longer nearby, you can focus on your health and recovery. Do whatever you can to keep your strength up. Help is coming. I have learned so much about radiation and its effects this last week. Had a major accident not occurred earlier this year with one of the Soviet Union's power plants, I wouldn't have even considered the cause of your illness. But radioactive material isn't as exotic or cutting edge as you may think. We've known about it for a long time, and its use in X-ray photography and cancer therapy has no doubt saved many lives. There are treatments available, and I've been in contact with an old friend who now lives in the United States and knows all about this field. Also, we were able to track down Ernesto. He had been in the custody of the revolutionaries for several weeks and eventually freed. Although they left him in rough shape, since then he's been hiding in a small village far from you, just as he had tried to do previously in your town. We had a little talk and got him to open up about what must have happened. Ernesto was once a doctor at the hospital in the city closest to you, but even with this income, his side activities caused him to build up a large debt. He embezzled hospital funds, and at times even sold off equipment that he claimed were broken. He fled when his crimes were discovered, but the damage was done, and the hospital had lost a great deal of money. Its assets and most of its employees were repositioned to a state-run facility elsewhere nearby, but the old building was not entirely emptied by the time the revolutionaries moved into the area. They raided the abandoned building and likely sold the majority of their findings for scrap, but one piece of hardware stood out to them: a radiological therapy device. They must have opened it up to find precious metals inside, not knowing the danger within. The object your children found was undoubtedly the radioactive heart of that device. I'm unclear on how the revolutionaries located Ernesto, but they must have found his information in an employee file on site. They brought him to one of their safe houses and tried to get him to cure their people who were sickened by handling the material, along with making demands, learning what it was they had stolen, and how much it might be worth. Their concept of radiology, foreign or poorly misunderstood. Once they realized that they had lost the device's source at some point and didn't even have it in their possession to show Ernesto, they threatened his estranged family and sent him looking for it, thinking he'd be able to find it easily with a detector he didn't actually have. It sounds like he talked his way to freedom, as he ended up running far away instead. He either didn't take the threat seriously or thought his captors would all be dead soon anyways, or he was just a coward. He refused to answer us either way, though he does send his condolences for the situation he inadvertently brought upon you. I'm confident he'll have time to think about everything over in prison, but you still have hope. I finally have the good news you were waiting to hear. The government is fast-tracking a so-called rescue operation and is planning to get you and the children out of there on a bus ride off that mountain by Christmas Eve or day. Perhaps it makes no difference to you, but the cynic in me must add that I already know they're only doing this for a good Christmas story and a photo opportunity in a time where the administration needs a win, and that they'll also be bringing everyone straight to the best hospital in the country for immediate treatment. I think that once the information about a radiation accident has been verified, they suddenly felt the need to act on a contain the situation before word gets around. I would expect shady government employees to approach you at some point while you're in care and make you sign a form agreeing to no-cost medical treatment in exchange for never revealing any of what actually happened in that town. The important part is that help is on the way. That's really all that matters. Please do everything you can to keep conditions stable for the next few days. As I write this, your ride out and the proper attention you deserve are less than a week away. I've always fought for you, Liliana, even as I feel deep regret for not doing more. I'll see you soon, assuming they let me visit you in the burn ward, which is where I figured they'd be sending everyone. God hasn't abandoned you. Yours, Hernando Gomez.
This is where the story could have ended, had just these letters been discovered. We'd have been left wondering what happened, maybe clinging on to some hope that everyone had made it out and received that care, even if they were left with life-changing injuries. Sadly, the first letter we were allowed to read, and Liliana's final letter, destroyed that hope long before we got to know her. She replied to Hernando's update, but that response never reached his desk. It was intercepted by officials, deemed a national security threat, then put into a lead box and filed away into a government vault. It was only recently uncovered and declassified, but the president of Colombia wanted to give a selected team of investigators a chance to uncover the whole story before anything about the incident goes public. It has been buried so thoroughly by the Vargas administration that the knowledge of the event had seemingly disappeared entirely only a few elections later. We can only take some solace in the fact that if not for Liliana Romero, we may never have found out the full truth of what happened to that small, dying mountain town. The story of its last remaining people was nearly lost forever between the bigger incidents at Chernobyl and the similar but arguably worse Goiânia incident in Brazil that occurred in 1987, nearly a full year later. All of Liliana's letters still have trace radioactive elements across their paper fibers and are now also kept inside lead containers, so we wore gloves while handling them. This one was slightly more toxic, perhaps in part due to the presence of blood droplets on the stationery.
Hernando, things are not well. Over the past few days, I've become quite weak. For some time, I've tried to deny what is happening to me. I can't any longer. I have patches of skin that are deep red and won't heal. Several of my fingernails have broken off. I can no longer hold down food, though I don't have an appetite to begin with. I can pull off clumps of hair, and I cough up blood. I've never been so sick. It feels like my body is losing to a common cold. Louis passed away this morning. There was nothing left of him at the end. I'd forgotten what his smile looks like. Now he's wrapped up in a blanket and buried outside. I barely found the strength to dig his grave, but as I understand this invisible poison, as you described it, he can likely keep contaminating others if I leave him in the mission. The other children have become so quiet. I hear them crying when they don't think I'm nearby. They look at me like there's nothing they can say to make it better, or that I hate them. But I don't. I don't care about Ernesto, or the revolutionaries, or political corruption, or any of that. All of them are working together, turned us into victims, or refusing to work together. All that matters to me now, and all I can do, is take care of these young lives until the end. I can't tell if any of us will survive. Thank you for at least caring and trying to get us better lives. You're an honest soul, and I believe also a victim in this tragedy. And no matter what happens to us, please learn to forgive yourself. And, if possible, help Sister Marta in some way. This will hurt her, yet I'm forever grateful for her guidance in life. My hand hurts so much. I can't write everything I wanted to. Maybe God hasn't abandoned us. But maybe I did. By coming to a place that he never watched over to begin with. The ravines look so lovely this time of year.
In early 2023, I was sought out to join a small task team, being one of the few people in the country known to have at one point lived in the town. With us was a mountaineer familiar with the landscape, who guided us to a place that was my childhood home long ago. The roads had worn away and overgrowth covered up any other paths, making the trek a treacherous one. We were also denied the use of a helicopter, out of fear that its rotor blades could kick up dormant radioactive dust. Due to missing or stolen hospital records, the orphan source and its potential wasn't known for certain, which was why the third and final member of our team, other than a provided security officer, was an expert on radioactive material and contamination. He brought along computer and scanning hardware to sample any remaining fallout in the soil. The fate of my old home had also been an unknown. We only knew that last contact was made shortly before the revolutionaries completely cut off all access to the area. By the time they had been driven out in 1990, the town was found to be abandoned already, although the lack of bodies suggested that most of its remaining people fled before it was too late, or died elsewhere. Instead of performing a rescue for the newspapers in late 1986, the government happened upon an event that they covered up and hid away. Some old reports mentioned a quarantine of the area, but it may have just been barely enforced. Anyone who made it out and knew of the cause of the illnesses may have been threatened or bribed to stay silent, or never found out what was happening to begin with. The letters don't confirm whether or not Sister Liliana told her neighbors the reason why so many people had gotten terribly sick. We finally arrived at the town after a 3-day hike and put on respirators just in case the area was still toxic. At first, levels were found to be just slightly above background, as expected. A small sample of material can only contaminate so much for so long. Handling it is the real danger, not airborne particles. Certain spots, like the general store register and one of the pews in the crumbling church, still showed levels approaching that of an X-ray exposure. All things considered, the ghost town was in remarkably good condition. The store's windows were broken and it had been emptied out, but that was the extent of the damage outside of decades-old deterioration. We found no vehicles or physical money, further evidence that at least a few escaped. The old mission was the only location where we kept on our respirators, as it had never been cleaned and still had levels that rivaled some of Pripyat's hotspots, according to our professional. I never asked what he thought the makeup of the orphan source could be, though I recall him remarking that it must have been particularly dirty. It sounds as if something used for medicine packed a lot of punch in a small package, or was poorly enriched. A dangerously rudimentary source used to cut equipment costs may also be apt descriptors. Once the town was deemed safe for us to explore, aside from the orphanage, a helicopter carrying a demolition crew was called in. Aircraft designed to fight forest fires doused the old mission to prevent further contaminated dust from being blown away off of the crumbling toxic building, and the structure was gradually demolished over the course of a day. The site was to be covered in concrete, and the rest of the town officially marked as a restricted area, out of an abundance of caution. It was a strange feeling for me personally to see my former neighborhood locked in time, and remembering my days as a child playing football with forgotten friends in those empty streets. Back when the town still had a heartbeat. I wish I could reveal its name, as it's actually quite a beautiful one, but I'm not really supposed to. If you live in Colombia or ever visit, don't go looking for it. Unlike tours in Pripyat, whenever they may resume following the terrible war in Ukraine, this land was never properly remediated. There could still be pockets of harmful contaminants lingering about. I realized that I must mention what we found out concerning the ultimate fate of Ileana and the orphans. Well, we aren't entirely sure. Although we did locate Luis's grave, the other children and Liliana herself are unaccounted for. They aren't believed to have survived, unfortunately, but not discovering what exactly happened to them, in what order, and what their remains could have told us is tragic and offers little in the way of closure. Still, there was one significant find. While the building was in the process of being torn down, things were paused and my team was called over to investigate a previously hidden room, which was exposed when floorboards were removed. In a corner of the small cellar was a disguised partition space, about 4 meters wide and 6 meters across. Whatever the room had been used for in the distant past, more recently the doorway had been boarded up and bricked off, making it look like it had never been there. At some point, the children must have found the loose bricks at the bottom of the wall and pried them out, along with the old rotting boards, and made themselves a secret clubhouse of sorts. They had hidden the entrance with some water barrels, although it was so small to begin with that only a child could squeeze through. Inside of the dusty room were about a dozen mostly run-down candles, a tattered rug, several copies of the Bible with its pages covered in crayon drawings, a few of which depict the children getting their revenge on the local adults they didn't like, and most notably, a single wooden chair, barely able to stand and with its back missing. It looked like the orphans had treated it as an altar, as atop it was a small blue pillow, something toddlers might rest their head upon. After all these years, it still showed the impression of an object it once held, an insidious thing that had irradiated the fabric to the point where the colors had been changed around where it sat. The settled dust in the room was toxic, and the pillow's readings were exceptionally high, to the point where direct contact could still prove fatal given enough time. The secret room where they once kept their sparkling thing was a haunting sight. Radiation is sometimes described as an invisible fire, and here, in a hidden chamber under an old mission in the rural foothills of Colombia, a torch was still burning all these years later. I wonder if Some of the children came to worship their discovery like the cursed idol Liliana called it. A small, warm chunk of metal that caused so much damage. We'll never know for sure, and now their conspiratorial hiding place is under tons of concrete. Last I heard, the government continues to hunt for the orphan source, which would still be dangerous to anyone that comes near it. I think they'll track it down eventually. It must have left a trail. I recently delivered a copy of Liliana's last letter to Hernando in person. He's where he's always been, and only retired a few years back after leading his entire department for a couple of decades. What happened to her and the orphans haunts him, that's clear. But I think it's also inspired him to work harder and have a softer touch with people. He saw firsthand the failures of the system, and together with a more modernized and less corrupt government, has helped create a better state welfare institution. Finally, being able to read Liliana's last words confirmed the worst fears he's held in for so long, yet closed a painful chapter of his life. A benefit in the end. I hope it helps him rest easier in his golden years. He has also formed a friendship with Sister Marta, and the two exchanged letters for years, well into the age of email. She passed away from cancer in 2017, making it into her 80s. There's no telling if radiation exposure was what eventually caused it, but she still lived a long life. Her only regret being that she too was unable to save a fellow sister or her wards. He isn't ready to share any of the letters they sent to one another, but I expect that we'll get to see them one day. He did reveal that Marta helped him through his feelings of guilt and uselessness following the events. I don't know if I'd call it irony, but both Hernando and Sister Marta had cancer in their 60s. He was saved, and she was given another 20 years or so on this earth through radiotherapy. While radiation can be a scary and seemingly malicious killer, it isn't evil. It just has to be contained and used carefully, like any other sharpened tool. I'm not frightened of it. When I went up that mountain, I was scared more by the thought of seeing a familiar face fallen apart and in disarray, perhaps littered with the desiccated bodies of its last inhabitants. But it wasn't. Actually, it looked peaceful at rest, and it's still up there, slowly sinking into the landscape. I'm going to take a risk and upload this story to the internet before the government publishes its full incident report. That could take years, and despite improvements from the days of the event itself, I don't fully trust that they won't try to make it all disappear again. One last thing that I hesitate to even give a mention: in the regions surrounding the foothills that once housed copper miners, there have been new folk tales, really little more than urban legends, that tell of a sickly woman with barely any hair, ragged clothes, and rotting gray skin. She shambles about and only speaks in low moans as she tries to find her equally sick children. All the while, anything she touches is forever tainted by an unseen poison. I highly doubt that there is an actual survivor roaming around. Radiation that mutates people into monsters yet keeps them alive is a thing of science fiction and late-night movies. Even if it's a cruel way to remember Liliana and her orphans, you could say that at least she's being remembered. I don't know who first passed around the tale, but it goes to show how a once-in-a-lifetime sight like a radiation victim can persist in local lore. That isn't the story I wanted to share, but whether she's immortalized with horror embellishments by the campfire, or through real letters from actual people, she perseveres, larger than life. I was at an after-work mixer not that long ago. Nothing big, just a gathering with some out-of-towners. We had a couple of drinks and got talking about the most unusual parts of our job. Nowadays, I work in bookkeeping, but I've been doing evaluation and audits back in the day. At 4 drinks in, the conversation drifted to where it always goes. Your weirdest job story. Now, I told them this stupid anecdote about a man who wanted to evaluate his vast collection of erotic art. It's a funny story that never fails to get a laugh. But that's not my weirdest job story. That story doesn't do quite as well at parties. But just this once, I'd like to tell it. I'd like to tell you about Flamingo. Some time ago, I did evaluations for a firm specializing in liquidation of company assets. Basically, when something went bankrupt, we were called in to evaluate the worth of leftover inventory, assets, and whatever else was legally owned by the company in question. This isn't exciting work. More often than not, we got it all on paper on day one. We just had to make sure it was really there. Glorified fact checkers. It was a scorching hot summer. My allergies were acting up, and the news was flooded about this missing 10-year-old girl. She'd been gone for days, and the video of her family pleading to the public was on repeat. Not a lot happened in that one area of the world, so this would be the biggest story of the year by far. I was practically melting through the floor when my boss dropped by my desk, fanning himself with a folder. "You got the email?" "What? No." "Okay, good." He sat down next to me, dropping the folder on my desk. "I was planning on sending you and Don on this, but Don has got to take some time off." "I got it, it's fine." "No, see, this is bigger than usual. I ain't sure what to make of it." "What do you mean?" "There's a lot of questions here, and we don't have a lot of answers. It's not just going to be checking some files. It's a lot. That's why I wanted to send Don, too, but..." He shrugged, giving me an apologetic smile. He tapped me on the shoulder and turned as he walked away. "Just take your time with this one. Do it right." Shortly after, I got an email about a private company that was getting liquidated. It was a small privately owned tech company based out of South Dakota. The sole elderly owner had recently passed in a home invasion gone wrong, and the board had decided to liquidate the company in its entirety. We'd gotten a couple of years' worth of documentation, but this company had been up and running since the 70s. I was going to be standing literally neck deep in paperwork. No wonder my boss wanted Don to help out. We got most of the paperwork sent to the office later that day. I had to sign off on box after box being dropped off at the door. I almost tore my back out carrying them all in, and the heat wasn't helping. The boxes were immaculately labeled, but we were talking decades of work. Financing, projections, board meetings, budgeting, personnel files. It was all there. By the time I had it all lined up, I had accidentally built myself a cubicle. I hadn't played in a box fort for years, but this was a decent enough substitute. I didn't know where to begin. Usually we got something to start with, but this was just dropped off and that was that. I had to start with the most recent reports and work my way back. There wasn't that much to be excited about. Those first few days, I listed assets like a company car and a regional office. There was also a rented storage space. I found some receipts for office equipment and a couple of computers, but most of them were from the early 2000s. I think it was somewhere in the delivery receipts that I first noticed the word flamingo. It snapped me back to attention for a moment. It's not the kind of thing you expect to read in a budgeting report, but it was right there. Flamingo. It wasn't a big cost, but big enough to be included in the yearly budget. No further explanation, no details, just flamingo. I put it aside for a while, but I noticed the word coming up every now and then, and as I looked through the files. And sometimes it'd show up in delivery receipts, other times in R&D or even storage. I could be reading about Microsoft Office subscriptions and then, wham, flamingo. It catches your attention, especially when you have no idea what it means. I was about 1 full week into mapping the company assets when my boss got a call. Apparently, while we were still working on processing inventory, Someone had broken into the regional office. The police were asking for someone to come down and do inventory, asking if there was any way to know what had been stolen. Someone had to go to South Dakota, and it wasn't going to be Don. He still had time off. I drove out on a Tuesday, windows down, blasting cold air, having an iced tea in my cup holder. The radio was still going on and on about this missing girl, but the tone had turned somber. It was no longer about finding her alive. It was more about recovery and finding out what had really happened to her. They were speculating, drawing parallels to other missing children, asking uncomfortable questions and pointing fingers at those in power who hadn't done enough. It was a nice distraction, even if the subject matter was morbid. It was a long drive, but the one-story office building was easy to find. They'd taken down the signs, and it was the only parking space that was completely empty, save for a squad car. 2 officers were ready to meet up front. I had printed out a list of items that I suspected would be at the office according to the most recent receipts. Just the big stuff. I figured burglars wouldn't be looking for staplers and reams of paper. If they just got away with some copiers and computers, we could probably get an insurance payout. There were 2 officers out front. They waved me over and escorted me inside, keeping the small talk to a minimum. Just a couple of lines and how about this weather? I couldn't blame them. One of them was on the chubbier side, and he was melting through his uniform. There was no doubt that the place had been robbed. The front door was smashed to pieces. I had to step over the glass as I made my way inside. "You know what's strange?" the chubby one said. "The door opens inward, but it's been smashed the other way." "Why is that strange?" I asked, glass crackling under my feet. "I mean, if they could get in, they could get out. Why break the door? Hell, the lock's still there, see?" He used his flashlight for emphasis. I nodded at him, taking a closer look. He was right. The entire door had been smashed to pieces from inside the office, torn straight from the hinges, and the lock was seemingly untouched. The officers left me to do their job, asking me to call once I was finished so they could get a proper report about missing or damaged items. I was left on my own for a while as I went around taking pictures, double-checking with my list of confirmed assets. Now, the place was admittedly a mess, but not as bad as one might imagine. The lights were working just fine, and most of the furniture was okay. A couple of things had been tipped over, and the drawers in one of the desks had been thrown to the floor, but all the electronics were still there. In fact, I couldn't see that anything had been stolen. Not anything big, at least. One thing stood out, though. At the far end of the room, there was a supply closet. The door was broken in 2, and all the boxes inside were scattered on the floor. One of the boxes had been torn to shreds. An old dust-caked box with a yellow note taped to the side. Flamingo. After talking to the police, I decided to take some time to look closer at what exactly Flamingo was supposed to be. There were a couple of notes here and there, but it was always separated by a degree of vagueness. For example, I noticed there were gas receipts about once per month when one of the employees went on a longer drive. That always coincided with a pattern of other receipts for such things as glycerin, antifreeze, and something described as Compound 5 Mix B. Same pattern over and over. Now, I didn't have a clear idea of what Flamingo was supposed to be, but there were some patterns emerging. It was something that had been going on since the 70s, up to the point of the company's liquidation. Some kind of ongoing thing that was only shut down once the company lost its funding. Flamingo wasn't that expensive, but it was definitely recurring. There had to be something else to it. Some kind of documentation that showed what the hell we were dealing with. At the very least, I needed some kind of description so I could do my job. I can't evaluate something if I don't know what it is. While in town, I decided I should check out the storage space. I had a pretty good idea of the kind of things they kept there, but I figured I might as well double-check. I'd had the keys delivered earlier that week, and it wasn't a long drive. Might as well. It was a private storage space as part of a larger warehouse location. Basically, a walled-off section lined with chain-link fences. It was already late in the afternoon by the time I got there, but just getting out of the sun for a while was enough to energize me. I was drowsy from my antihistamines, something I kept chewing like candy to deal with my dust allergy. Did you know those things are basically sleeping pills? Yawning, I got to the storage space. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. I was the only one there as I closed and locked the door behind me, turning on the lights. The moment the light turned on, something moved. I heard things getting knocked over and clattering to the floor as something crashed into the light overhead, breaking the glass and turning the room dark. My pulse exploded as I pressed my back against the door, fumbling for the lock. I'm calling the police! You're not supposed to be here! I'm calling the... I got the door open. As light flooded back into the room, I realized how quiet it was. I pulled up my phone, ready to call for help. As a couple of seconds stretched into a full minute, nothing happened. I started to doubt myself, thinking maybe something had just toppled over or a raccoon was hiding inside. It would be silly to call for help over a wild animal, so I decided to take a closer look. There was nothing in there apart from a strange black mark on the floor. There was this smell of ozone in the air. So I kept the door open to flush it out. The glass from the broken light littered the floor along with a couple of open boxes. It didn't surprise me to see that these were labeled Flamingo. A lot of other labeled boxes in that room were untouched. Looking through the boxes, these seemed mostly left alone. There were tapes, camera equipment, folders, and a box of what looked like turkey basters made of stainless steel. All the boxes had been ripped open and looked through, but nothing had been removed. They were stuffed to the brim with a variety of items. I picked one of the boxes at random, marked Flamingo 1981. It wasn't a large or even heavy box, but it was taped shut. I opened it just to have a look. First thing I saw was a children's drawing in crayon. It was kind of hard to tell what it was supposed to be, but it looked like a portrait. A child, 2 parents, and 2 doctors. On the bottom, a text. "Thanks for the snow globe." I loaded up my car with a couple more boxes and took some pictures of the more expensive items. I was surprised to see medical equipment. This was supposed to be a software company. I returned to that crayon drawing a couple of times, taking a closer look. I couldn't tell if the child was a boy or girl. They didn't have any hair. They also had the outlines of their body drawn in a gray crayon, not a pink one like the parents or the doctors. The reference to a snow globe could be seen in the picture, as one of the doctor characters was holding out one like a present. I decided to call it a night. I checked into a motel and closed the curtains. I'd have to wait to check the videotapes until I got back to the office. I didn't want to plug anything into a motel TV. Instead, I browsed whatever was left. Photos, reports, test results. Once you got past the Flamingo description, there were a couple of names that kept coming back. One of them was Christine or Chrissy. It didn't take a lot of digging to connect her to the crayon drawing. A lot of the reports were transcripts from her discussions with one of the doctors, as well as observations made by staff. Most of them were fairly short descriptions, like a kind of progress report, something that was meant to be added to an ongoing file. Other names were those of doctors and software developers. It seems they were using some kind of program to figure out a solution to a problem that affected Chrissy. Exactly what wasn't clear, but they perfected something they called Compound 5 Mix B. What exactly that entailed wasn't clear. Something about seeds, an echo drive, and synthetic nutrition. There was a whole section written about the physical effects of consuming antifreeze related to this. But what really stood out to me were the observations about Chrissy. She'd been part of Flamingo since the 1970s, just after the founding of the company. Some of the observations about her were absurd. Day 465. Still unable to enter REM sleep. Day 476. Confirmed independent eye movement and dual cognition. Cross Report 8. Day 877. Procedural breach found in parking lot? ? Day 1022. Tongue atrophy. The reports hinted at this girl in need of medical attention, but it wasn't clear as to why. They were working on some kind of solution and had been for a long time. Whatever it was, It resulted in some kind of compound that they had been producing until recently. Something that, even when written out, didn't make sense to me. What the hell is a Helianthus cerulea anyway? It was almost 1 a.m. when I turned off my lights and closed all the boxes. I crawled into bed, barely keeping my eyes open. I've never liked sleeping in unfamiliar places. There's always noise that you're not used to. Luckily, I was out like a light the moment my face hit the pillow. In the morning, as I put on my jeans, I turned my head. My alarm didn't go off. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, only to see that the boxes I'd checked were wide open. I'm sure I closed them. The boxes had a lot of old media, like cassettes and VHS tapes, but there were a couple of CDs that seemed a bit more recent. My car stereo was pretty old school, so I tried to put something on to listen to on the way back. It was going to be a long drive, and I figured I might as well get acquainted with the material. Most of the CDs didn't work, or had text files rather than audio, but a couple of them included what sounded like recorded conversations. They all started the same, reciting the date and the name of present staff members. Same names over and over. They didn't mention who they were talking to, but I had a sneaking suspicion. One of the recordings went something like this. Are you still experiencing issues with your vocal cords? There was a murmur in the background, then a clicking noise. I see. No effect from the inhaled sulfur? 2 clicks. Sorry to hear that. Any other recent issues you've experienced in your new environment? There was 1 click. The person in the recording can be heard shuffling around with some equipment, only to spell out letters. A couple of things were brought to attention, such as food, tired, and finally broke. That seemed to get the interviewer's attention. Broke? What broke? They spelled out the word globe. We'll get you an extra one after your next session. How's that? 1 click. Flamingo seemed to be the collected name for all things related to Chrissy. Even later entries confirmed she was still around, alive, and active. Born in 1976, she'd come a long way from the Crayola drawing she made in 1981. They still spoke about her like she was a child, promising toys and gadgets in exchange for cooperation and tests. They never spelled anything out completely. All I learned about Chrissy came from context. The word flamingo, for example, it seemed to come from some kind of digestion issue, keeping her from absorbing the kind of nutrients and vitamins a person needs to live. From the day she was born, she was given this compound 5 mix B as a substitute. Whatever it was, it kept her alive. She'd be dead without it. They would ask her really strange questions like how well she could see with her eyes closed, or if she could open doors without using her hands. Or, in this one instance, if she was still experiencing growing pains in her arms and legs. She gave 1 click for yes. They seemed to have a good relationship. They'd keep a good tone and even joke around. They sometimes talked about dosage and treatment, but it always had this tune of something pleasant. Almost like looking forward to a meal or a spa day. It was something to be excited about. And at the end of every session, they'd give her a snow globe, seemingly for no reason. I think she just liked them. She wanted one from each state. I came back to the office late in the afternoon. Most of the others had already gone home. I got an email about Don coming back to work in the morning, and we needed to get him up to date on our progress. I had to do some overtime to write up a summary, or I'd have him tailing me like a lost puppy all week. I kept the lights on and barricaded myself in my makeshift box fort. Apart from the fluorescent lights, it was eerily quiet. I put the radio on just to have some noise in the air. I turned on my desk light and organized my papers, firing up my work computer as I settled in for a long night. I didn't mind. It was paid overtime. I checked out a couple of CDs that I couldn't get to work in the car. More notes, audio snippets, records, and measurements. They never exclusively spelled out what they were measuring, but some of the numbers stood out. 380.2 pounds, 7 feet 9 inches, 78.8 degrees Fahrenheit, too dense to swim. It was about 8 p.m. when I got up to have a coffee. I had my headphones on, listening to an audio recording as the machine sputtered. They were listing things they'd found in Chrissy's room that hadn't been there during their last checkup. For example, she'd gotten a hold of live piranhas which she kept in an aquarium. They were discussing how the hell she got them to begin with. As I took a sip of coffee, I thought I heard something. Removing my headphones, I listened. I could hear the radio in the other room, but that was it. I called out, "Hello?" There was no response. Thinking I was getting paranoid, I silently crept back to my workstation. There was nothing there, but I could have sworn I'd heard something. I lowered the volume on the radio and turned off my headphones, trying to pinpoint the noise I'd heard. It was strange enough just being there after hours. The place was usually littered with people talking over one another or tapping away at their keyboards. Now it was just me. Just to be sure, I double-checked the lock on the front door. Getting back to my desk, I figured I'd ought to move the boxes a little. Right now, I was literally boxed off and I couldn't see anything. Something could be standing right outside the door without me knowing. But as I moved the boxes a little, I got this chill down my neck. I kept thinking about that morning in the motel. I was sure I'd closed those boxes the night before. Something wasn't right. I got back behind my desk and sat down. The moment I touched my keyboard, I heard a noise. The front door that I locked was slowly opening. I was about to look who it was, but something didn't feel right. It wasn't so much the door opening, but the way it had opened. There was always that familiar click when you slot the key into it. I hadn't heard that. I suppressed my instinct to call out and instead pulled my feet up off the floor, staying behind the boxes as still as I possibly could. Whoever came in hadn't seen me yet. The steps weren't even. I could hear naked skin slap against the stone floor as someone limped inside. I heard some items getting knocked off desks as whatever was on the other side stumbled through the room. It made this awkward gulping noise like someone cold starting an engine. Finally it coughed and the lights went out. There was this cool wave of air rushing over me, sending the hairs on my neck straight up. I watched as the box at the top of my would-be fort was effortlessly picked up. The box weighed at least 45 pounds, but it was taken down like it was nothing. I was so quiet I forgot to breathe. I could see outlines in the dark. There was this shadow on the floor showing something tall and gangly. Every now and then it would make that uncomfortable gulping noise, then proceeded to open in another box. It felt like hours, but it was probably just a couple of minutes. It was fast, as if looking for something very specific. It didn't stop to read labels or reports. Then I got a text message. I think it was just Dawn checking if I had anything to send him up to prep for the meeting the next morning, but I'd forgotten to put my phone on mute. This one loud ding echoed through the room, and I heard whatever was on the other side react accordingly. It was such a sudden noise, and it was surprised. It stepped back, getting its foot snagged in one corner of the power cables. It pulled back too hard and dragged along my computer screen and keyboard, knocking over the box fort as it went. About a dozen boxes collapsed to the floor. I was quick on my feet. The moment it all came down, I hid under my desk. I pressed my face against the ground. There was a small space between the desk and the tiled floor, giving me almost a full inch to view what was on the other side. I didn't see much. It was dark, and the only light I got were from the light posts outside. But I did get a clear view of this tall silhouette, almost like a stick figure. A far too small head for a far too long neck. No hair. Long arms with a strange number of fingers. I couldn't see it breathing. It was completely still. It raised an arm and I could see it shaking. It poked at one of the empty boxes, then looked closer at the one that had tipped over. It picked up something small and held it up, turning it over just inches from its face. Then something happened. Something flipped like a switch. The radio burst into static like the frequency shuffled on its own. The kitchen light came on and instantly popped. A flash of light revealed something gray with leather-like skin. I could hear the microwave running as I saw the shoulders on this thing rise and fall over and over. It dropped whatever it held and tore the boxes apart. Years of documentation and reports thrown to the wind as it flailed its arms around. It stomped down so hard that one of the boxes popped like a balloon, spilling out folders and employee onboarding handbooks. It put one of its legs on top of a desk and pressed down like a vice, breaking the cheap wooden furniture like a snapping twig. And as it raged and threw its weight around, sending boxes and desk lamps and screens flying across the room, it accidentally tipped over my desk, revealing me. And it stopped. Now, I can't tell what I was looking at. Not exactly. I don't recall seeing any eyes or a mouth, but there was something strange about the space where a face ought to have been. I couldn't see ears or a chin or a nose, but there was movement. 100 little movements. Little things twisting and turning in the dark. A strange circular motion, a hole. I don't know why I figured it would attack me. Some animals stopped moving when faced with a predator, as moving might trigger an instinct to chase. That's what it felt like to me. I was curled up on the floor looking up at something I didn't understand. So when it reached for me, I was ready. I ducked down, feeling two of its fingers brush against the top of my head as I headed for the break room at full sprint. The radio was going haywire. It had gone from playing a shock jockey to police scanners to static. There was a blip coming from the fridge as the electronics kept failing. I could see a light outside blinking through one of the windows, and I could hear a car alarm go off in the parking lot. The emergency exit sign flickered as I ran towards it. Just as I was about to reach the handle, I took a hard right towards the bathroom. As I did, something slammed into the door behind me. I heard the hinges snap as the door flung open, triggering a deafening alarm. I rushed into a bathroom stall, closed the door, and locked it. I covered my ears and curled up on the toilet, keeping my feet off the floor. Seconds later, I see the latch on the door move up and to the right, and the bathroom door swung open effortlessly. It's just standing there, shielded by the dark. The crescendo of failing electronics reaches higher and higher. It tilts its head slightly to the right, and suddenly it's all quiet. No alarms, nothing. It looks at me. It doesn't move a muscle. It's staring me down as if looking for something in me. I'm plastered against the back of the stall, trying to make myself as small as possible, my head growing faint from lack of oxygen. I can't breathe, can't think. Without a sound, an arm reaches for me, not menacingly but determined. I say the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know why. Chrissy, don't. The arm stops. I don't have anything. I don't have what you're looking for. The arm falls down to its side, long enough to scrape the floor. It makes a clicking noise once, searching my face for the hint of a lie. I take rapid, shallow breaths. It turns its head to the left, relaxing its shoulders. Then it turns around and leaves. I watch as it walks out the back door. The moment it passes the threshold, the whole building comes alive. Alarms, radios, microwave, fridge, and every light came back in a wave of impressions that punched my senses dead. I blink as my eyes tear up and I look outside. But there's nothing there. It's just gone with a faint smell of ozone. I called the police and my boss. The security cameras failed to capture anything. Most of the boxes that had been knocked over were fine, and even the reports seemed to be salvageable. There were only a couple of items that had been broken. A couple of empty test tubes with aged yellow labels and what looks like a snow globe. Nothing fancy. Just a little souvenir thing with a "Don't mess with Texas" label. Just bad luck, I suppose. It took us a few days before we got back to the office, leaving me some time to go through the last of the reports. It seemed that the last of the Compound 5 mixes had been delivered months ago, and that there were no more scheduled deliveries. If this was something Chrissy needed, she was running out and fast. I tried checking a couple of VHS tapes, but they'd been demagnetized. But more so, I found something I'd been looking for. A shipping address. I didn't go alone. Not only did I bring Dawn, but we brought the police. It was company property, after all. The place was registered as part of an industrial warehouse, but it was sectioned off with layers of fences and barbed wire. All the locks were long since rusted shut, so we had to cut them open. We followed 2 flights of stairs downward, leading to what looked like an abandoned bomb shelter. It took a lot of effort, but we got the door open. No one had touched it for ages. The entire room was cylinder-shaped with a drain in the floor. There were no lights. We checked the walls with flashlights, sweeping over empty shelves and open drawers. Someone had been there recently, and they'd cleared the place out. I could tell the place had been packed. There were handwritten labels taped to the walls. Some of them were simple enough. Labels for pictures, clothes, and tools. Then a label for snow globes. Every single state labeled, but the shelves were empty. Someone had taken everything and just left. Don took a closer look, sweeping over the labels with his flashlight. "It's missing Texas. How about that?" The place was covered in dust, but a couple of spots were left clear. There'd been collections there until recently. On the far end of the wall, there were test tubes and turkey basters. Labels of C5MB meticulously dated, going back at least a decade. It had stopped a couple of months prior. The officers left as soon as the coast was clear. While Don did some long overdue paperwork, I sat in my car and blasted the AC. I thought about that name, Flamingo. The flamingo gets its pink color from the shrimp it eats. It's a result of its diet and environment. Chrissy had never managed to digest the things we take for granted. She grew up on a completely different set of vitamins and minerals, something they'd make up in a lab back in the 70s. Then again, if they hadn't, she probably wouldn't have survived infancy. But what features of ours are inherently human? What is the human equivalent of the flamingo's pink feathers? What had Chrissy sidestepped and what had she gained in turn? I couldn't make sense of it. Instead, I turned on the radio. Maybe the shock jockeys could drown out my thoughts for a bit. There was no music, and all the local channels were reporting the same thing. They'd found the missing 10-year-old girl. They dubbed the rescue an act of vigilante justice. A deceased suspect was found on the premises, apparently killed in a brutal fashion. The girl had been released from a locked basement and reunited with her family. She had initially been taken on her way to show and tell, where she was going to show off a souvenir from a recent trip down south. An unknown vigilante had broken into the house where she was kept. In the one soundbite they got from the girl, she spoke in a Texas accent. When asked to describe her rescuer, she had only this to say: "That thing stole my snow globe." We finished our liquidation of the company and closed another case. Most boxes were filed away or destroyed, throwing decades of documentation down the shredders. I never got a clear view of Chrissy, and there were no answers as to what became of her. There was no recipe for the compound. And maybe she figured it out. I guess she had to, or else she'd have starved to death. When people ask me about my craziest work story, this is the one I want to tell. I don't know what to make of it, and the people with all the real answers are long since gone. It's so much easier to tell stories about creepy old men than trying to explain the flamingo. But I can honestly say I think about it every day. I can't help but wonder, if we are stripped of the building blocks that make us what we are meant to be, what remains? Hey everybody, Kevin here from Nightmares Nightly. If you made it this far, I want to thank you all for listening. I did this in the last video, and I'm going to do it in the next few videos for a little while, but I'm going to put a little outro in here to let y'all know that I'll be live streaming every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live streaming, live reading, and doing big projects that I have in the works. Right now, we're working on a 4-hour corrections officer with a strange list of rules on a tribal reservation land. We're an hour into that, and we will begin picking up where we left off. And if you missed last week, I'll be sure I'll sum everything up that we missed, so you won't be too lost. I'd love to see you all there, and it's a spot to get a live reading done and ask me anything you want, and we can all hang out and chill. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. Log user Ethan Oplin, Lieutenant of Star Post Paradius. Entry begins. 48 hours. It has been 48 hours since the end. 48 hours since devastation and fire. Since we aboard Star Post Paradius became the home of the last known humans. We had only realized something was going wrong when the artificial gravity shut down. There had been no alert of a system failure, which meant that the only possible explanation was the failsafe. In the event of a cataclysmic event on Earth, or the destruction of the broadcast facility within Planetside Expedition Command, the station's non-critical systems would shut down or cycle to reduce power to aid in the survival of the crew. Artificial gravity fell under non-critical. Unless the alert system not engaging was part of the system failure, and not the failsafe at all. Either way, it wasn't good. I'd been the closest to the command center, so I pulled my way into the room, letting momentum carry me to the primary console. Gripping a handhold, I reached out to engage the main screen. I linked to an orbital surveillance probe, trying to get a view of Earth. I remember my heart plummeting at what I saw. My own dread had drowned out the shouts and cries of horror from the others entering from the other passages. Hellfire. Flashes of light tearing open the clouds and scorching the surface. Nukes. Nuclear warheads detonating across the planet. This had to be a prank being transmitted from Planetside Command. The Star Post commanding officer, Theodore, was first to reach the communications equipment. Expedition Command, this is Star Post Paradius, respond. Static. Expedition Command, this is Mission Commander Theodore Armstrong of Star Post Paradius. Waypoint for Lunar Colony Project Alpha, respond. More static is all that came through. We were watching the annihilation of mankind. The loss of our world. And we were powerless to stop it. Each minute that dragged on brought another burning blast that marred the once shining visage of our little blue marble. I gripped the handhold tighter, as if it would anchor me to reality as long as I held on. No, this isn't happening, a voice muttered from the entryway. Ensign Hetwing. He'd been with us a few months, eager to make himself useful. I and another crewman, Josiah, had surmised he was trying to earn himself a spot on the lunar colony. The colony that could have been. Where was Josiah? Floating overhead near the ceiling of the room and gritting his teeth? It's happening. Hetwing was already hyperventilating. But my family, my dog, all my things back on Earth. No. He thrashed and kicked at the open air around him in a bid to turn himself around. When a hand found purchase, he yanked himself down the corridor. It took us several seconds, in retrospect, several seconds too long, to realize what he was doing. Kicking off nearby surfaces as safely as we could, we gave chase. A chase that looked ridiculous from an outside perspective, I'd wager. As we began to close in on him, he found Hetwing at an airlock. He was curling his fingers over the emergency release. If he pulled that, the airlock wouldn't close the inner bulkhead first. It wouldn't depressurize the chamber. He would be opening the station to the vacuum of space to cold, horrific death. Josiah was closer, but I was the one to speak. I opened my mouth, but only got out 2 words. Hetwing, no! And the lever came down. I remember his face. That single instant of realization in his eyes as he realized what he'd done. That microsecond of regret, then horror, Before the exterior hatch's emergency explosives popped the clamps away and the atmosphere of the station immediately spewed out into space. Hetwing and that hatch were gone before we could even blink, and we were about to follow. Thank God the emergency system still worked. A backup interior bulkhead slammed down, and most of us were able to grab something or fumble with handholds just enough to slow it to a safe drift through the room. But not Josiah. Josiah had too much momentum. He'd been halfway into the chamber when the bulkhead came down. He'd been feet first, and the swift descending metal cleaved through his waist. He was dead in seconds. Most of us wouldn't have processed it before he was dead a full minute. In his last moment, Josiah's eyes met mine. I saw a final flicker of fearful realization before he was truly gone. The moments after that had become a blur. I couldn't recall them if I tried. Truth be told, I'd rather prefer not to think about it. But I would always see Josiah and Hetwing. Their faces. Their haunting faces, their final gaze. It seared into my memory. It's been 48 hours. 2 Earth days interspersed with restless sleep tainted by nightmares of that chaotic moment and the forming hellscape of our homeworld that had caused it. Theodore has me monitoring the communications equipment today. He and the other survivors are doing inventory. Orville is checking our medical supplies. Merrick is doing rounds to tally the rations. And old man Xavier is helping the commander with everything else. I just have to sit here and listen in case some poor bastard survived Armageddon. It's boring. Boring enough for imaginations to run wild. I swear I can almost hear Josiah's voice on the comm line. Entry ends. Cycling to next entry. I'd always be thankful for whoever decided that Starpost Paradies needed a simulated day and night cycle. Without that, I think that the only thing which would have reminded me that I needed to sleep would have been the commander himself. It has now been 6 days since nuclear devastation claimed the surface of Earth and left us stranded between the planet and its moon. I've been fortunate enough to be stuck with communication duty. As repetitive as it is to send message after message to Earth, knowing that there is little to no hope of ever getting a reply, it's leagues above digging through zero-gravity storage to maintain inventory logs. I'd also sooner be handcuffed to this console for the rest of my life before I volunteered to suit up and crawl along the exterior for system maintenance. Why would I sign on for a space mission if the idea of being in a spacesuit filled me with so much dread? Well, it wasn't the spacesuit idea. It wasn't the idea of having only a tether line anchoring me to the station. No. What scared me was knowing that if something went wrong, that there was nobody left who could be deployed to rescue me. I cued the main line again, hearing the faint hum of static. This is Lieutenant Oplin of Starpost Paradies. Again, calling out to anyone who can receive this signal. Please respond. Leaning back in my chair, I once more began the grueling task of waiting for nothing. Deciding that I didn't actually need to be in the chair, I stood and wandered that cozy corner of the command room. I approached one of the security consoles and began flicking through the exterior cameras. Maybe I could get a head start on identifying any problem areas for those given the task of stepping outside. Cameras watching over hand grips, stabilizing thrusters, the few remaining airlocks, now 3 from what was once 4, after that damn fool Hetwing had his breakdown that resulted in the deaths of him and Josiah. The only upside to it that any of us could find, the most minuscule bit of solace in, was that we now had 2 less people drawing from the life support. Foolish, foolish Hetwing, who had just drifted by the camera focused on the solar panels of Section C. I paused, damn near freezing where I stood. That was impossible. There was absolutely no way he could have circled around to pass the station. I isolated that camera, cycling the footage back 10 seconds and playing it again. Nothing. Just the solar panels in the viewport nearest the camera that gave a peek into the botany labs within that section. Not a single sign that the vacuum-ravaged corpse of our late crewman had spontaneously manifested on camera. Must have been a trick of grief. A lack of sleep? I didn't have long to think about it before I heard Theodore's voice. "Getting bored?" he asked. I swung my head around, and he could clearly see the panic on my face because his expression soured instantly. "The hell is wrong with you?" he asked. I couldn't explain what I'd just seen. There was no evidence, and it couldn't have been real. There was no point in recounting a subconscious daydream as fact. "Nothing. Just zoned out and my imagination played a trick." I waved a hand. Made me a bit jumpy. Jumpy was an understatement. I hadn't felt my stomach twist like that in a few days. He narrowed his eyes but asked no more questions. "Switch the feeds over to Section D. Xavier is coming back from inspecting the exterior access panels." Section D, the medical section. We rarely ever used it. Nobody had so much as a strange shoulder since our deployment to the station. With a nod, I tapped the controls until the angled view of Section D was on the big screen. There was the bulky outline of the environmental suit that contained the eldest of our crew. Xavier had been part of the whole colony on the moon thing since before Star Post Paradies had been fully completed. Some say it had been his convictions and his presence alone that kept everything going. He was sliding an access panel open with the awkward movements that were all his suit would allow. The things were clumsy, but it was a small price to pay for vacuum protection. They were built to withstand the vacuum of space, minor shrapnel damage, electricity, and maybe even raging infernos. Normally, we would have had the suits inspected and damn near turned inside out every week. But their last day of inspection had been the day the Earth died. Since then, it had been one of the last things on our minds. Even now, that thought stayed in the back of my mind. No sense of urgency rushing it to the forefront. We'd wind up regretting that. I reach out and press the button to link to his suit's comlink. "Xavier, it's Ethan. How's it going?" "Last panel, Lieutenant," Xavier replied, delicately using one of the tools on his belt to temporarily shut off the magnetic seals holding the panel in place. He took it and allowed it to attach to the small magnet resting on the outer thigh of the suit. It was to ensure that the panel didn't just go flying off into nothing forever. "Just gotta make sure this power junction isn't in danger of giving out on us. Wouldn't want things to go dark in there, would we?" I managed to chuckle. Can't get much darker than the mood, right? The joke felt hollow. I wasn't even sure why I'd said it. Even if I truly felt that humor could ease the situation, I couldn't think of any possible joke that would alleviate our doomed struggle to delay what would inevitably come to pass. Xavier grunted. "You'd be surprised just how fucking shitty things can get even when it looks worse. Trust me on that. It can always get better. And it can always get worse." He was cut off as his hand made contact with the conduit. Several things happened in that moment. We caught a microsecond of his body convulsing backwards, the camera watching him cut to static, and an alert of a momentary power surge pinged from an operations console. "Xavier!" I shouted into the microphone. Theodore hurled himself through the room, limbs out to catch himself so he'd not go sailing past the security controls. He mashed several buttons, finally managing to restore the feed. Xavier was drifting away from the exterior hull. The only thing keeping him close was his tether. We couldn't get his comlink restored. We couldn't get any signal from his suit at all. I pushed myself away from the consoles and towards one of the corridors leading towards Airlock 2. There would be a switch near the airlock that would allow us to retract the tether until he was near the airlock and we could pull him inside. Orville was there by the time I arrived, suiting up and preparing to step into the pressure chamber. He met my eyes as I floated towards him. He grimaced. "Commander called me up from the storage bay in Section B. How bad is it?" I shook my head. No idea. Only know is there's a power surge, lost the feed for a moment, and now we're not getting any signals from his suit at all. Orville's grimace deepened. Fuck, that's not good. I better get out there. Hit the lever. With that, he stepped into the chamber and properly sealed the inner bulkhead. Through my panic and worry, I couldn't help but remember the absolute riot act the commander had drilled into us after the incident with the ensign about proper airlock procedure. Of course, everyone knew the proper procedure, but even then, we'd all know that it was the commander's way of processing the deaths of 2 people under his command in the wake of losing our home. I opened the emergency panel near the airlock, before finding the lever for Xavier's tether. Yanking it down, I leaned against the wall, hissing softly when my forehead met cool metal. Minutes passed, maybe more than I thought, before I heard the sound of the pressure chamber, atmosphere being restored. When it was safe, I watched the hatch open as the others arrived. Orville pushed Xavier in as he began to take his suit off. I grabbed Xavier first, hands frantically searching for releases with Merrick's help. Theodore was moving to aid Orville. With rising frustration, I finally got the seal on the helmet undone. I pull it free and he was dead. Dead before we'd even begun the rescue effort. His face was frozen in pain. The shock must have sent him into cardiac arrest. Shit. Son of a bitch. Merrick pushed himself away from the body, which pushed it into me. I couldn't draw my eyes off of his face. Hollow eyes, which had once held so much wisdom and experience. All of it meant nothing now. None of it saved him from one faulty suit. He was gone. Another body. 3. 3 dead. The last sliver of humanity was whittling away. Theodore was barking orders at us. He was trying to snap us back to reality. I couldn't hear him. Everything was a buzz. Had the damn hallucination been an omen? Ensign Hedwig's visage coming to claim Xavier? No. That was stupid, but maybe it was. Theodore dragged me back to reality by grabbing me with a shout. Lieutenant! He shook me. Get your head together. We need to handle the body and focus on those of us that are still alive. Ever the sensible one, Theodore was. Guess he had to be. Some would say he was cold. Maybe we needed to be cold or realistic, he'd call it. One more body for the morgue. One faulty suit to be dismantled and left for the trash chute. I quickly volunteered to help him dismantle the suit. I couldn't be near Xavier's body anymore. I couldn't look at that face. It was already burned into my memory alongside Hedwig and Josiah. I didn't need any more time at memorizing the wrinkles in his face or that frozen agony in his eyes. We were silent as we took the suit apart, pushing the pieces toward an open, anchored crate. When we finally removed the visor from the helmet and pushed the empty shell towards the crate, I couldn't bear to look. I was worried, stupidly so, that I'd turn and see Xavier's face staring out at me. I instead looked down at the visor. My own visage stared back at me. I felt like if I dared blink, I'd see their faces looking back at me. Hey, Merrick said with a grunt. You all right, Oplin? I jerked up a bit at that, blinking a few times. I'm just... It's just a lot. Last humans, you know. And we're down 3 people in less than a damn month. It's scary. Merrick shook his head. You need to focus on your work. Takes your mind off that mortality shit. I stared at him, incredulous. Our crewmate just fucking died, and you can just take your mind off of it? Merrick shot me a look. Damn right. Because losing our fucking minds is gonna kill us a lot faster than mourning an old man who was a complete idiot with his suit. I wanted to punch him, smash the visor over his face, but I kept it in and pushed the visor into the crate. Once it was all in, we sealed the crate and made our way out of the room. 4 of us left. 7 down to 4. 7, 4. We lost 3. If that happened again, I'd be alone. But that was stupid. We just needed to be careful, stick to protocols, and we'd be fine. We would all be fine. Nothing wrong with lying to myself a little bit, right? Entry ends. Cycling to next entry. Warning. Entry corrupted. Initiating memory restoration. Restoration complete. Beginning playback. Things haven't been going well. We jettisoned Xavier's remains through one of the intact airlocks, like we did with Josiah 7 days ago. I haven't spoken to Merrick since. I fear he'll be callous to the point I'll want to swing at him. If violence breaks out, there's a chance it'll never stop until we're all dead. Well, I suppose there's no point in lying here. The reason I haven't been speaking to Merrick since we jettisoned Xavier's remains is because shortly after, we got into another argument about what he called the futility of mourning in a disaster situation. I'd shouted at him, called him a heartless piece of shit. He'd called me a pussy who shouldn't have ever been assigned to the hard work they were doing in the first place. It would probably have come to blows if Theodore hadn't stepped in. We don't use the communications console for more than an hour a day anymore. What's the point of extended effort on a venture that'll yield no results? Of course, Theodore's reasoning was that we needed to conserve power, but we all knew the truth. We were alone, and our numbers were already beginning to dwindle. Humanity would be extinct before long. I just knew it. But I kept it to myself. I wasn't going to spend my last days confined to quarters for, well, embracing the inevitable. A man could only lie to himself for so long before that lie stopped being strong enough to push away nightmares of dead colleagues, faces floating in murky darkness as our clammy, blood-stained hands reached for me in my slumber. A slumber that was becoming extremely rare. I couldn't keep my eyes closed for more than a couple hours at a time. It was eating away at me. I could feel it. It didn't help that with each nightmare, they were getting closer to grabbing me and dragging me into that abyss. Now, we couldn't spend all day performing system checks, exterior inspections, and documentations of inventory. This wasn't anything new. We had been graced with plenty of downtime between tasks before the cataclysm, but now, with the grim knowledge and the haunting memories that all but clouded our minds, we dreaded downtime. Today, I was 7 moves deep into a chess game with Orville. The 3 years younger, looked like he had still just turned 18. Hell, Hetwing had looked older than this smug little bastard who was kicking my ass. 7 moves in, and he had already claimed 3 of my pieces in the last 4 moves. Who the hell taught you to play like this? I asked. Orville raised a brow. Taught myself. I looked up the rules, taught myself to play, and then found out I had a real skill for it. His answer carried a tone of disconnect, as if he wasn't even really thinking about the words that left his mouth as he made another move and took yet another one of my pieces. I couldn't make the excuse that my mind just wasn't in it, that I was distracted about all the things we had been forced to endure. The truth is that I just suck at chess. With a grimace, I moved to claim the piece he had just used. His bishop, which had apparently been a sacrifice so that he could move one of his knights to claim that rook? Fucking hell, I didn't even notice. Merrick laughed from across the room. Smug, arrogant prick Merrick. Merrick floated over, looking at the metal board and the magnetic pieces. Good thing you were never a squad leader for troops, Oplin, he mocked, reaching out to jostle my shoulder. The board was disconnected and smashed across that smug asshole's face before he, Orville, or I knew what was happening. I kept swinging, snarling and bashing in his skull as Orville screamed and shouted. Blood everywhere, bone and brains visible. I was killing Merrick. I was... Hey! The snap of fingers brought me back to reality. An intrusive fantasy. It hadn't happened. Merrick hadn't left his seat, and I hadn't pulled the board off its magnetic anchor. but I was glaring at Merrick, and the look on my face was clearly making him uncomfortable. Orville, too, being that he was the one that snapped his fingers. "Ethan, hey, you okay?" I turned my gaze from Merrick and back to the board. Yeah. I'm okay. Just spaced out. Trying to figure out how to delay losing another round of chess. I attempted a weak joke. Orville was quiet, clearly concerned. Merrick was leaving the room, casting one last dirty look my way. "Maybe we need to put the game on hold," Orville suggested. I took a breath and nodded. I need to do the comm check anyway. Next time, Orville, I'll win next time. I gave him a feeble smirk and began floating my way through the corridors to the command center. I wasn't looking forward to when Theodore caught word of my glaring at Merrick that I was going to hurt him. Though, to be fair, I'd wanted to hurt him. To kill him. That wasn't normal. I know that. But so much has happened. So much was lost so quickly. How can anyone not become a little off-kilter after that? I flicked the communication beacon to life with a single switch turn. I begin my hour of pointless repetition, saying the same line into the microphone every 3 minutes. My name, rank, the name of the station, and begging for a response. Response that wasn't going to come. Why were we bothering with this? Why were we bothering with anything? I was musing over this after my 16th repetition when I heard the crackle. Not the static that usually greeted my responses. A momentary, almost imperceptible crackle. I sat up straight, trying to backtrack to whatever frequency I had been on when the crackle came through. I hadn't been keeping track. Damn it! I did my best to narrow it down to bring that crackle back to the speakers. A noise like that couldn't have just happened. It couldn't just be dead noise. Somebody had to have tried to respond. It's the only possible explanation. When the hour mark came, I didn't power down the equipment. I couldn't just shut down a console and there was a chance we had made contact with a survivor. I made one last adjustment, hearing the crackle of noise. And a second later, it was gone. The entire console had just lost power. No, it hadn't lost it. Someone had remotely shut it off from one of the power junctions. I cursed and moved to the security console, pressing firmly down on a button. "This is Oplin. Did anyone just use a junction box to cut power to the communications console?" The voice that responded sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "Merrick here. I shut it down because the hour passed, Lieutenant." It had nothing to do with the fact that the hour had passed. He must have known that I had made contact, so he cut the power. Probably waiting for me to leave so that he could swoop in and take it for himself. Try to make me look out to be incompetent. "If your hour is up, Lieutenant, finish up in there and get to something else," Theodore spoke over the intercom. "Sir, I just need a few more minutes. I'm sure I heard something." I could hear Theodore audibly scoff. Unless it was a voice, whatever came through was probably a glitch. We're not wasting any more power on the comms than absolutely necessary. Now get doing to something else. That's an order. As they both shut their ends of the line off, I swear I heard Merrick snickering. I needed to find a way to prove I was right. Maybe once they slept, I could restore power to the console and work until I had to sneak back to my bunk. Or maybe I could just restore it now and tune to the frequency. That frequency. I'd been so angry at Merrick that I'd already forgotten the frequency. Shit! I grit my teeth and made my way out of the command center, drifting along passageways until I reached the med bay. I'd do our inventory on supplies here then. It was close enough to the command center that if Merrick tried to sneak over there and steal my finding, I'd hear him. I'd hear him. I occupied myself with opening compartments, checking their contents and confirming it on the primary medical computer. This was normal. Up until the 5th compartment. Sedative storage primarily, with a few high-strength pain suppressants. We were supposed to have 20 counts of sedative. We had 17. 3 counts worth is missing. I made the necessary documentation for the log and hit an intercom button on the wall. "Commander Armstrong?" Theodore spoke a moment later. "Lieutenant, what is it this time?" "Can you come down to the medical wing for a second? I have a minor issue," I said softly. I then switched off the intercom before drifting listlessly as I waited. When he finally arrived, he looked agitated. I wasted no time in showing him the log and then the storage compartment itself. "You called me down from helping Orville to calibrate the power grid? For a minor stock inconsistency?" he grumbled behind me. I blinked once, then twice. Was he chewing me out for doing my job? "I'm sorry, sir?" Theodore raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You just said—" "I haven't said anything, Lieutenant. I think you need to cut your duty short and go to bed if you're hearing things. That was probably what happened at the console." He shook his head. "Now get going. That's an order. I'll take it over here." I stared for a moment, but did as I was ordered. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Trying had brought a new nightmare. Until now, they'd been the horrible deaths of my colleagues from an outsider's point of view. Not now, no. This was worse. Moments after my eyes had closed, I was met with the visage of my hands wrapping around the airlock's emergency release. No, not my hands. Hetwing's hands. I was watching Hetwing through his own eyes as my own voice tore through a haze of panic and desperation. Both those hands were moving. I saw everyone. Orville, Josiah, Xavier, Merrick, the commander, and myself. Before space claimed me. The dreamscape alerted instantly, a brief haze of the station around me speeding by as metal sped down towards me, staring into my own eyes. And then it was cold. Cramped and cold. And I could only surmise that I was peering through Xavier's lifeless eyes. Then came hands across the visor of a spacesuit. Muffled yelling accompanied the helmet's hiss as it came free. Merrick screamed, and I felt the body jostle before I was once more meeting my own gaze. Then the visions marred and blurred before tearing themselves into an ethereal sea of nothing. Had my mind run itself ragged? It didn't matter. I was finally asleep. I only woke up once in the middle of the night. I'd heard tapping outside my quarters, but when I went to check, there was nobody there. I think I'll try to recapture that fleeting sleep. There's nobody but us four on the station. Merrick was probably just being a prick. I can't let him get to me. In these moments, I wish... Warning. File corruption present. Unable to complete log. Cycling to next log. I've been neglecting making these entries after rereading the last one. Was I really that unraveled already? Am I so easily toppled? It kept me away from this log for 2 months, but I needed to make this one. Especially after what happened yesterday. 2 major events, which have altered our situation for the worse. Commander Theodore Armstrong is dead. This is what happened. It was time for that damnable hour of transmissions. Nothing but static yet again. I wasn't even graced with the softest crackle. We'd likely lost our window to make contact. If it had been somebody, they were most likely dead now, and we were all alone again. I remember mentally cursing Merrick's name before the security console began issuing a shrill, repeating beep. Leaving the communication console running, I floated over to the security controls and checked for the cause. A transport ship. One of the automated craft from Earth. When the Star Post was under construction, those involved with the project decided that automation would save time, manpower, resource, you name it. A network of satellites and automated supply docks orbited closer to the planet. Whenever we ran inventory, we would document how long our current supplies would last and would then transmit a supply request to that network. Supplies would then come up from Earth, be loaded by automatons onto the transports, and one would be sent our way. Our last request had been months ago, the day before Earth died. Well, this would extend our estimated survival time. I tapped the intercom. "Commander, seems we have an incoming cargo ship." Theodore didn't reply for a minute. When he did, it was clear he was surprised. "Forgot we called for that. I'm going to the docking bay in Section A, and I'll send Merrick and Orville to help you run the docking protocols from there." I nodded. "Got it, Commander." As I switched the connection off, I realized I probably wasn't as excited about this arrival as I should have been. I didn't know what I felt. Well, not at first. The strange feeling, or lack thereof, was quickly replaced by a growing concern when I checked the radar. That transport was approaching way too fast, and its course was off. It was going to crash into Section A. Shit! Orville was entering at that moment. "Commander said something about a ship coming in?" he asked. I turned to him. "Ping the transport, tell it to slow down and change course. It's going to plow through Section A if we don't stop it." Orville paled, but thankfully quickly composed himself and made his way over to the communications console. "Incoming craft, your course and speed are incorrect. Correct your course and decelerate to avoid collision. Comply." The order at the end was hollow. Our orders would process as a request, which the transport would then relay to Earth to command. A command which would never receive the signal. The thought dawned on me, and that growing concern was transformed just like the emptiness before it. Now it was panic. And the panic intensified when the robotic voice of the transport filtered through. "Course correction, request received. Synchronizing with central control. Error. Connection timeout. Error. Connection timeout. Error. Connection timeout. Connection to central control failed. Maintaining course." Dread. Dread sank into every nerve as my shaking fingers hit the intercom. "Commander, the transport's coming in way too fast and off course. It's going to hit Section A." I heard Theodore cursing. "I'm on my way out. I'll hit the emergency seal when I'm back in the central substructure. Keep trying to get that thing to fix its shit." That was when Merrick arrived. "The fuck is going on?" Orville was barking orders, demanding the transport change its course. It kept responding with the same failures. He was frantic, bordering on begging the automated projectile not to collide. This was all Merrick needed to hear. "Is the commander back yet?" "Still in Section A," I replied, watching him on the cameras, eyes flicking to the radar over and over. It was too close. It would hit. The station would be open to vacuum. It would spin itself to devastation. My eyes fell upon the emergency bulkhead controls. I could seal off the entire section. I could give us a chance to halt the spin once it started. A slim chance, but a chance. All I would have to do is seal the bulkhead. Seal the bulkhead and kill Theodore. I don't remember what course of thought led to my decision, but I hit that button hard. The alert of the bulkhead went off a second later. Merrick was the one to speak, his harsh tones snapping Orville out of the loop of pleading he'd sunk into. "What the fuck did you just do?" I clutched the edges of the console. "It saved us. Get ready to correct our spin," I said. "No, fuck you. What the fuck did you just do, you lunatic?" Merrick began to pull himself towards me. I didn't look at him. My attention was drawn instead to one of the security console screens. Theodore had reached the bulkhead. He hammered it, looking to the camera and screaming at me to open the damn thing. He'd made it. There had been time. And as that realization set in, all hell broke loose. The noise of metal shredding, though muffled by the station itself, nearly deafened us as everything around us went spinning. My hands scrambled and feet kicked. Orville screamed and Merrick howled curses. The station was in a death spiral. The momentum would tear it apart. We were going to die. Hetwing, Josiah, Xavier, Theodore. We'd join them. I finally caught something. A console. We could fix this. We had to stop it. I tried to pull myself closer with a grunt. "The retros!" I screamed over the alarms blaring in our ears. Orville seemed to have heard, given he was desperately trying to get into a chair as the world tore itself apart around us. Merrick was still tumbling. As we tried to fire off the boosters, I heard Orville shout in pain. "Merrick, you left those fucking pens out!" he shouted. Had it been any other situation, I'd have laughed at that. Not right now. Right now, I was focusing on not dying. It felt impossibly too long before Paranormal finally slowed its spin. We all clung to our handholds as our knuckles turned white. Orville was the first to weakly speak. We survived? We actually survived that?" "Most of us did," Merrick said, his tone heavy with accusation. "Somebody let the commander die." I felt anger boil anew under my skin. I didn't know he had time. I was thinking of the group. Half true. I didn't know he had time. But when it came to thinking of survival, I'd only thought of Hetwing and Josiah and sharing one of their fates. Orville and Merrick had not been on my mind at all, beyond what use they would have been to aid in stabilizing the station. But I wasn't going to admit that. He would take that and use it to justify his claim. I hated him. I hated Merrick so deeply. Maybe I'd always hated him and just hadn't realized it until the day Xavier died. "Bullshit. You're just a damn lunatic who's waiting for ways to kill people. I saw the way you looked at me in the lounge," Merrick snapped. "Guys," Orville spoke up. I clenched a fist, Orville's word falling on a deaf ear. "Maybe I just looked at you the way somebody looks at a person they can't stand because he's a prick." "Guys!" Orville screamed, snapping our attention away from one another as he rested a hand on one of the monitors. "Look!" We both made our way over, and I felt ice across my skin as I observed the display. Starpost Paranormal had been knocked out of orbit. We were slowly going to drift further and further away from Earth until the open void of space claimed us. And we'd used up too much fuel correcting the spin. We were going to float away, and nobody was going to come save us. These logs, our inventory checks, nothing matters anymore. We're dead men floating. We're going to die. We are going to die. Entry ends. Cycling the next entry. It's been 3 months. 3 entire months. When it had whittled down to 3 of us, rationing out the rest of our supplies became a lot easier. We could probably last until an entire year passed. The realization that we were drifting off into empty space didn't really bother us after the first few days. Sure, knowing you were about to drift away from home is terrifying, but once you start reminding yourself that the home you're thinking of doesn't really exist beyond scorched ruins, it becomes a lot easier to process. Hadn't stopped the nightmares, though. The faces of the dead. The tapping. My mind replaying Theodore's screams, and even seeing the lost souls when I turned corners for only a moment. I'd even had a few more hallucinatory murder fantasies between then and now. And on that note, I think I should stop stalling and get to the reason I'm making this log entry after so much time has passed. I phrased it as, when it had, instead of since it had, because it's not the 3 of us anymore. 4 hours ago, I was with Merrick and Orville in the command center. We had taken to spending most of our time there, looking over reports and seeing where we could go before heading outside to do even the smallest amount of damage control. "This would be easier with the commander here to decide where it would be best to work," Merrick remarked coldly. "If you have something to say, Merrick." I shouldn't have taken the bait. But when you hate somebody, it doesn't take a lot to get under your skin. Then fucking say it. Orville sighed. "Not again." "If you'd been a sane person and waited for the commander, he'd still be alive," Merrick snarled at me, lips bared in a hateful sneer. "You've been unhinged since this began." I took a deep breath, clenching a fist. I wasn't unhinged. Sleep deprivation did not equal instability. I was fine. I am fine. I am not unhinged. I thought we didn't have time, so I made a split second. He cut me off. Don't give me that. You probably just wanted to see what it would be like when a man died because of you. He was sneering now, and I could have sworn there was a glint in his eye, as if trying to antagonize me was a joy for him. Though a voice in the back of my head was shouting at me to reel myself in. I wanted him dead. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to silence that judgmental, mocking voice of his. We've been isolated, stuck together, and I couldn't tolerate it one moment longer. I turned fully to him. You do not know me, Merrick, so stop acting like you do before you regret it, I warned him. I didn't know what I meant by that. Would I hurt him? Would I kill him? He pushed towards me, arms out. Do something, Oplin. Fucking do something. Prove me right. I stared him down. I could dig my thumbs into his eyes, wrap my fingers around his throat. The urge was there. It would be so easy to kill this scumbag who'd been a constant source of torment. I hesitated long enough that Merrick thought I was backing down. He sneered again. Huh, that's what I thought. He began to turn away when something flew past my head. I'd only find out later that it had been one of Merrick's loose pens. It had coasted into Orville's personal space and he'd grabbed it, thrown it away from him. Guess our arguing had been getting to him more than he'd shown. It hit Merrick in the back of the head. He grabbed the console closest and spun himself around to lunge at me. Fucking prick, he screamed. He must have thought it was me. Regardless of what he thought, he was attacking me. I had to defend myself. He swung at my head, and I barely got an arm up to defend me. We swung and kicked at each other. With how ferociously he was fighting, it stood to reason he'd been coming undone faster than any of us. Or he just wanted an excuse to hurt me. Either way, I had a feeling he wasn't going to stop until he killed me. A fist met my jaw and I spun. He gave me a kick to the back and I found myself hitting a console. Hey, enough! Orville tried to get involved, only to receive an elbow to the face from Merrick, who immediately returned to coming after me. He wasn't going to stop. I had to stop him. I needed to stop him. I managed to move out of the way of his next swing before managing to get my arms around his head. The headlock did little to subdue his shouts of anger and his flailing limbs. I'll fucking kill you, Oplin, you sadistic sack of shit. A powder keg is ruptured. There wasn't any going back, no calming him down, none of that. As we tumbled, I finally got a proper position of leverage. I tightened my hold and with one firm shift. The snap was loud in the confined space. His body fell limp instantly. I'd killed him. I killed Merrick. My ears rang and I just stared down at his lifeless face. Another face of death that would haunt my nightmares. I had to, I muttered. Orville was staring at me. I had to. I don't apologize. I don't. I killed him because I had to. I'd do it again. It's just Orville and me now, drifting into nothing. At least we're safe. Safe. Orville won't look at me. Won't talk to me. His eye is swollen from Merrick's elbow, but he isn't calling me a murderer, blaming me for any deaths or any of the things Merrick had been doing. I think we're going to be able to figure out some way past this and keep working together. Entry ends. Cycling to next entry. Unable to locate. Retrying. Unable to locate. Retrying. Unable to... Entry located. Recompiling. 6 months. 6 months. I haven't made an entry in 6 months, and things have gotten worse. They're back for us. And that's not the worst of it. The ones from beyond got Orville and almost got me. I've been taken to slowly creeping around corners, peeking to make sure I'm not running into the dead. Is it my mind? Or something more? Like what got Orville? It might still be out there, hiding from the cameras. It learned after the first time. It started 2 weeks after we used one of the airlocks to get rid of that bastard Merrick. I've been cleaning one of the tables in the lounge room. It hadn't been visibly dirty. It wasn't even really on the rotation of the duties. I just needed something to do. I had just finished and was about to move on to the next table. The table where Theodore's frozen body sat, face stuck in an angry scream. None of his body was moving, but his eyes, his bloodshot, near-burst eyes, they were trained on me. I had recoiled and screamed, trying to get away. I got halfway across the room, turning to see if it was following, but it was gone. Gone? How the hell was that possible? Was I crazy? No. I was fine. I'm not losing my mind. I was not crazy. That would mean Merrick was right. I would not let him be right. As time went on, I'd see it the others too. Standing in corridors, not hovering, standing, as if the lack of gravity meant nothing to them. They would stare at me, no movement, no words, just their eyes tracking me. Josiah would stand over my shoulder when I used any of the consoles in the command center. Hatwing hung around the med bay. Xavier began photobombing the external cameras. Merrick was in my fucking room. His face was blank, but his eyes held rage and hatred. I had taken to bringing a small anchor belt to hook myself to certain areas so I could sleep anywhere but my room. I refused to look at his stupid face. I refused to meet the eyes that judged me for taking an action that he forced me to take. I'd learned to keep an eye out at the 4-month mark, how to navigate around them and ignore the accusatory stares. But what came 2 nights ago? It threw every plan to the void. I woke up in the middle of a fitful slumber, anchored near a viewport. I had a few moments to clear my mind, blinked the sleep away, and thankfully was not confronted by any of my dead crewmates. I had a reprieve that was shattered the moment I looked out the viewport. A tendril. A thin, coiling tendril. Some drifting cosmic horror had found us. I had to warn Orville. I unhooked the anchor and began clambering around the station, screaming Orville's name. No answer. It got him. It must have lured him outside. I was alone. It killed him and it was going to kill me. I had to reach the control room. Maybe the external robotic arms could give me a few more moments of survival. I reached the control room, sweating and breathing hard as I scrambled weightless and frantic until I found the console. My hands were shaking as I called up the first of the 6 arms. It had been 8 before the transport had cleaved through Section A. There was nothing on the camera nestled inside a port on the end of the arm. Cursing, I flicked over until I found something. The tendril. Its end branching out into a monstrous extremity that spotted one large eye and disjointed sluggish digits. It was peering around the edge of the torn hole where Section A had once been attached to the main node. It was trying to find a weakness. It was trying to get inside. I took control of the mechanical arm and maneuvered it in. Noise was coming in over the comms. That console on the far side of the room? I wasn't listening. I refused to be tricked or taunted. I'll wound this thing or kill it, whichever I can manage. The arm's clamps clenched down on the tendril. I yanked and spun the arm, aggressively manipulating the controls. The noise over the comm console grew louder, much louder. It was trying to get in my head. No, not today. Just die already, I screamed, before giving a harsh pull of the controls. The arm spun abruptly and the tendril ripped, the extremity flailing as it was sent spinning away. Again, the communications noise grew ever louder. Relishing my victory, I pushed my way across the room and practically punched the switch to turn the console off. Its last desperate attempt to assault my mind in its death throes was foiled. I cheered. I had beat a cosmic horror. I had avenged Orville. Or so I thought. It was then that I heard an alert from one of the maintenance consoles. At first, I thought it was something the being had done, that it had managed to damage the station before I chucked it away. My heart still hasn't pulled itself out of the chasm it sank into when I read the notification on the console screen. Tether 5 was damaged. The damage had been detected 45 seconds ago. Reality slammed into me as hard as the transport had slammed into us so long ago now. That hadn't been an alien tendril. That hadn't been some monstrous extremity at the end of it. It had been a tether, keeping Orville attached to the station. And I had just sent him spinning into the abyss. The packs on the suits came with their own small maneuvering thrusters, but they weren't powerful enough to correct the amount of force with which I had thrown him using the station's arm. One moment was all it had taken. One hallucination was all that was needed for me to ensure my solitude and condemn an innocent man to a slow, agonizing death. I couldn't switch the console back on. As much as I wanted to apologize, it wouldn't do him or me any good. I couldn't maneuver the station to go grab him, and he couldn't maneuver back. No, I'm lying. I'm not turning the console back on, but not because it's hopeless, but because I don't want to hear his condemnations of my actions. Or worse, any forgiveness that I should never in a million years expect to receive. I'm all alone now. Alone with the dead. Perhaps Orville will be joining their ranks soon. Entry ends. One log remaining. Decrypting. Decryption complete. Beginning playback. My name is Ethan Oplin. I am a lieutenant. I am an operations officer stationed aboard Star Post Paradius. I am the last surviving member of the station's crew. But I am not the station's only occupant. It has been approximately 37 days past a year since the planet Earth was lost to nuclear Armageddon. I only know this because of the primary computer. Strict rationing of the remaining resources on board has kept me alive, but it will run out soon. I have at least another 2 months. The visitations upon me by my dead crewmates have increased in occurrence and aggression. Reaching towards me, mouths open with teeth bared, eyes full of rage. It took a week after his death, but Orville joined them. I remember the first time. The others have been absent, quiet. No howling screams of hate or accusations of murder. Not even a brief flicker of Merrick's form over my bed. I'd almost thought I was finally waking up from this abominable nightmare, until I felt the fatigue of sleep deprivation, the aching muscles and bones that were sure to atrophy due to no gravity, and saw my unshaven face and dirty uniform in the mirror. It was only when I floated to the corridor that I discovered the source of my reprieve. A spacesuit. Whatever was in it made sure its feet clung to the deck plating. I couldn't move. I stayed there, transfixed. There were tears in the seams from which a black ichor oozed. Its hands lifted toward his helmet. Its seals corroded before my very eyes, and when the helmet began to lift, I heard the noise. The same noise that had assailed me during my hallucinations that resulted in my murder of Orville. Only now, my fractured mind finally filtered the noise into something I could understand. Orville's voice, shrieking and screaming in panic as he pleaded with me to stop, as he begged for his life. The helmet was removed and I saw his face. No, what was left? His jaw was severed at one side, dangling at an angle. Coiled around it was a tendril of muted silver that came from within the suit. Another tendril rested along the side of his head, plunged into his eye socket. His remaining socket was home to the eye of the cosmic beast I'd envisioned. I wanted to be sick. I wanted to cry, to scream. A second later, the specter lunged at me with a scream. I howled in terror and shielded my face with my lens, but nothing came. After that, I would see him every other week, and each time he got more bold, attacking me in the control room, lounge, even my room. As it drew on, even the others got more bold, attacking me themselves. They were closing in because they knew I was getting weaker. 2 weeks ago, I began to move more and more supplies into the command center. I had to contend with the others trying to hurt and stop me, but I was getting it done. While raiding the other crew members' rooms, I came across something. Hidden cases of sedative in Merrick's room. He'd been stealing it. That's why there was less than documented. I'd done the right thing killing him. He hadn't been trustworthy. But that didn't really matter anymore. I finished moving everything I would need to survive until the rations ran out yesterday. It's all here, in the command center. 2 hours ago, I breached the remaining airlocks via the maintenance console, making sure to override failsafes. I sealed off the command center. Now it's the only place with atmosphere and air. I hear them beating on the bulkheads. I see them staring at the only cameras I keep running, positioned outside each sealed entrance to the center. They want to join me. They want me to end my solitude and join them. I won't. I am the last human alive. I have a duty to preserve our species for as long as I can. The communications console keeps beeping. There's garbled crackling coming through. Can't remember whether or not I turned it on. I don't think I should answer it, even if it is real, and it could be my last chance to talk to a survivor. It could also be a trap by the one screaming outside my safe haven, screaming for me to die. I have to stay here. I have to stay alive. My name is Ethan Oplin, and I will not submit to the dead crew of Starpost Paradius. Godspeed. Log filing complete. Warning. Data corruption detected. Multiple system failures in progress. Loss of logs imminent. Beginning probe upload. Probe launched to initiate immediately upon full upload. End. Also, quick message, everybody. I forgot to put this in while recording, so I'm doing it now while touching up the edits. I am going to start live streaming every single Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The live streams will be, if there's any updates to the channel, I might do a little bit of just while people funnel in, get some gaming in there, just while people, come in for the night, because the live stream focus is going to be me narrating live and editing live big projects. So whenever I have a 2, 3, 4 hour story in the works, those will be on the live streams. And I hope to see you all there. I really enjoy reading the stories live, engaging with everybody, answering questions. Getting to know everybody a little bit more on a more personal basis. I really enjoy it. It's been a lot of fun. I've done 3 so far, and I like it a lot. I hope to see you all there, and this will be, as of now, in every Monday night at 7 p.m. EST. I hope to see you all there, and as always, thanks for listening, everybody.